And then it happened again. It just like providence or luck, right? And next thing you know, Dumbfounded sends, Sean a link, right, to this Korean trap rapper named Keith Ape. And he's like, yo, and Sean's playing it for me. He's like, yo, this is the hardest shit I've ever heard. And it's Jaeson Ma from Keith Ape.
What's up, guys? Welcome back. It's Justin Kahn. Welcome to my podcast, The Quest, where we dive into the lives of trailblazers, the ups and downs that they go through, and help you figure out life and get to where you want to be. Before we get started, make sure to bang that subscribe button and ring that bell for new drops every Tuesday. Today, my guest is Jaeson Ma, the co-founder of 88rising. This man literally went from gangbanging and stealing to making a song with Bruno Mars. In this podcast, he reveals the behind-the-scenes stories behind 88rising, investing with MC Hammer, Linsanity, and much, much more. Check out the podcast. Cool. So I was doing some research for our podcast, and you are basically the most interesting man in the world. I feel like you've done some of everything. I'm so excited to dig into this. Like I'm super, super stoked. But I want to start off, with the quest. We always start off with like the origin story, right? So tell me about your childhood. And I get the sense that maybe it was a difficult one, but I don't know. And I want to just hear about it from you. Like, what was it like to be you growing up?
I definitely don't think it was the traditional Asian American household. I always just thought of it as like if you looked at the word dysfunctional family, that would be a picture of my dad, my mom, my two sisters, and I. And so, my mom was basically, raised us as a single mom in San Jose, California, in the South Bay. We were always in a weird, like, middle suburb in between the hood and the rich people, and then we were not rich, but we weren't like super poor, right? But it was like barely month to month, Mom had to take care of baby. She did daycare to pay the bills, and I was kind of like the only man in that house. I was the youngest of three. Dad was out doing whatever he was doing. He was in and out, and so it was an interesting childhood for sure. It was pretty rough. I just remember my eighth grade project. We had to create our own magazine, and I remember the magazine I called it Shiznit, SHIZNIT, and it was a Wu-Tang Clan symbol on the front of the magazine. And I made myself the last member of the Wu-Tang Clan, and
the ninth
so I was
member.
like, exactly, the ninth member. And I was really into hip hop. I was really into hip hop culture, and I just wanted to be black, just straight up.
Yeah.
And so that was just kind of like my growing up was just very interesting. I grew up in San Jose. It was a very diverse area. If you look at our high school, junior high yearbook, you literally see Indian kids, black kids, Mexican kids, white kids, Asian kids, Southeast Asian kids. Most of my friends were either Vietnamese or Filipino, or even DJs, rappers, breakdancers, or Southeast Asian thugs. And so that was pretty much my childhood, man. It was pretty crazy. But I got into a lot of trouble. I started hustling when I was 12 years old. I started selling candy door to door. So if you're ever like at like a gas station, or you're like at a shopping mall, parking lot, you see some, roughed up kid walking up to you with a cart full of candy, that was me. Right.
Yeah.
And I was just trying to think about, like, very young, like, I need a hustle. I need to make money. Right. Mom doesn't have enough. Right. And so it started with selling candy. And I used to fake that I was like in this like at-risk youth program. And it really was this really wild, like super, super dodgy white dude that picked me up in front of my junior high school when I was 12, 13, and was like, you want a job? And I was like, doing what? He's like, he was like, and he had this giant white van, this caravan, and he just like opened the door, and there were like four other kids inside. I mean, it literally looked like you're gonna get in a car to go over to Mexico for a sex trade, right? And And I like jumped in. I was like, "What are we doing?" He was like, you're gonna sell candy, $5 a bar. Every bar you sell, you get $1." And I was like, "Done." And so it was called Youth in Action. I remember, and I used to go up to random people in the hood, in nice neighborhoods, in parking garages, in parking lots, gas stations, just be like, "Hi, my name is Jaeson Ma. I'm from Youth in Action. I'm an at-risk youth. I'm trying to stay out of gangs and drugs and out of jail. I'm trying to sell these candies so I can earn a trip at the end of this year to go to Disneyland. Can you please help me?" And then I was kind of look at them with a sad face and like doggy eyes. And then I would sell like 20 bars a day. And then like every time at the end of the day, when we were done with like our 4 hour, like whatever, you know, candy slinging session, he would pay us in $1 bills. And so at the end of the day, I just felt like a baller because I had 20 $1 bills. And then we would go to like a mini golf, right? Like golf land. And we would just like spend it all, right? On Street Fighter and like, and just like pizza, right? It was just the most amazing thing ever. You're 13 years old, you're making $20 a pop a day. And it's just like, you know, you felt like you're Bill Gates. But anyway, so that's kind of like how I started the hustle, I guess you could say that. And then I got into a lot of trouble. Then I got to drug dealing, and I started growing weed. And then I started, you know, just slinging shrooms. And then, you know, I was hanging out with like a lot of just bad kids in junior high and high school. Got into a lot of trouble, got arrested a few times, and you know, I'm just thankful I'm not statistic. I'm still alive right now.
Yeah. So you how did the trajectory change? Because for most people, when they start hustling, the next step is going to jail, right? Like, what happened where you kind of change your trajectory?
It's a great question. I got kicked. So, like I said, I wasn't your traditional Asian American kid, obviously. Um, my two sisters were back-to-back valedictorians. They were, Chinese school, straight A's, president of the Chinese club, JV varsity tennis, valedictorian speech, and like I said, I really thought I was black, and I thought I was gonna. I grew dreads in seventh grade. And I mean, I just really was this wild child. And so I got kicked out of 3 high schools. Correction, I drew my dreads my sophomore year of high school. I'm thinking, I'm tripping right now. So my sophomore year in high school, I had dreads. And I remember they putting in beeswax and not taking a shower for like a month. It was the most disgusting thing ever. And I had acne. It was horrible. and, uh, and so, talk about identity confusion. But no, so I got kicked out of 3 high schools. So I grew up in the east side of San Jose. I went to Sierra Mount Middle High School. That's where I got into a bunch of gang trouble with my mainly Southeast Asian Vietnamese gang friends. And then my mom was like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. She's like, I'm moving you out of Philly. You're going to the other side, right? And you're going to go to Bel-Air. And so I moved to Cupertino. Okay. And my mom was like, this is where all the rich, smart Chinese kids are. And she was like, you're going to get good grades and you're going to be a good boy, right? And so I go to Limbrook High School and I get kicked out in 6 months because I brought a 9mm to school for no reason.
What?
This is Limbrook, right? Like, who brings a gun to Limbrook, right? So I bring a gun to my locker room, to my locker, and I remember because there was this place called Rainbow Park, and these stupid white kids that were acting like they were cholos. And I grew up around real Norteños, right? And so I was walking back home one day, and there were like these white kids that thought they were cholos. They thought they were like Mexican, right? They were like wearing XIV and these baggy pants, and they're like, "Yo, what's up? You think you're Mexican?" And I'm like, "Are you guys insane?" Right? I'm like, "You guys are a bunch of white kids, right?" And I was like, "This is stupid." And I was like, "You guys really want to mess?" So the next day, I called all my Vietnamese homies. We came up in 8 cars in front of Limbrook High School, and I pulled out my guns in front of Rainbow Park, and then some girl found out about whatever was happening, and told on me to the principal. And yeah, so they arrested me, and then I mean, because I didn't do anything, they transferred me to Cupertino High, and then I went to Cupertino High, and then I got arrested or caught for dealing weed, and then. And then at that point, I was just like, I'm just done. I was like, I'm just really done with West San Jose. All these Asian kids are stupid. They're whack. You know, they don't know anything about the street life. Like this is just all make believe, like Trumanville, right? And I was just like, I need to get out of here. I need to get back to the hood. And so like I convinced my mom to move me back to East San Jose. And so so I ended up back in the hood, and I moved to Flickinger Park in East Side San Jose, right across from Independence High School, where my aunt lived. And because all my homies were Flicktown, which was a local gang, and they're half Filipino, half Vietnamese, Cambodian, and so so I went to Indy. And so Indy, if you don't know Independence High School in San Jose, it's just like it was one of the craziest high schools, right, in the city. It was like 4,000 kids, 4 villas, and you had like Norteños fighting Sureños every day. You had Vietnamese fighting Filipinos. You had Filipinos fighting Norteños. I mean, it was just like constant war zone, right? And so I still remember the day where my trajectory changed. We were in front of the locker room, and it's like an outdoor, like a locker room in front of the school. And this crazy Cambodian gang called CWA, Cambodians with Attitude. And so I still remember they're on Story and King, which was like in the heart of East San Jose. And these guys were like older than us. We were like 15, 16. And these dudes were like in their 20s, right? And they came like a dozen of them. And I still remember they had machetes. They had knives, they had bats, they had everything. And all I had was my little blue rag and my locker room lock on. So I had a brass knuckle.
Yeah.
That was all I had. And I was like tripping out because when they came up, it was just, they were like, yo, what's up? You guys split town? And we're like, yeah, what's up? And then I was like, yo, I'm gonna die. I'm just gonna die. I'm gonna get killed right here. And I had not been to church in like maybe like 6 years. And I kind of made a peace with God. I was like, God, I'm gonna get rich or die trying. And I'm Jesus, you're cool, but right before I die, I'm just gonna ask for forgiveness, and then you'll let me through the pearly gates. So I was just gonna be like, the 1 minute Christian.
That was the plan.
That was the plan. And so I was like, so right when he was about to attack me and attack my buddies, and this is a dude with the machete. I was like, God, if you're up there, in my head, I was like, God, if you're up there, I don't even know what I said. I was, God, if you're up there, give me a second chance. And out of the blue, like these narcs came, like these campus police officers, you know what I'm saying? Like they're fake police officers, but they're police officers, right? So they're like in their little go-kart, like, woo, woo. And I was just like, oh shit. And so I just book it, right? We just start running, right? And then I just remembered the thought came in my head, like, oh man, like maybe God heard my little prayer in my head. But then, it went out the other ear. I forgot about it, got right back into trouble, right? And then so where it gets crazy was junior year going to senior year, I was working at this place called the Great Mall in the Bay Area. I don't know if you know the Great Mall, but it's number one, it's not that great. Number two, it's this huge outlet mall in Milpitas, California, which is like the armpit of South Bay. And I was working at this Italian suit store called, I don't even want to mention the name. and so yeah, we sold Giorgio Armani and Valentino suits. And I had a whole laundering scheme. So basically me, my Filipino homie and my Indian homie were laundering suits out the back because we controlled the inventory.
Yeah.
And so basically we're laundering suits, like $1,000 suits. And so like, by this time I'm like 16 years old. I'm a junior in high school, and I'm making maybe like $5,000 US a month, right? Which is kind of crazy.
Stealing suits from the suit store.
That's right. So like me, the three of us were the managers, right? So we literally, we knew every inventory going in and out because it's an outlet mall. They're really not keeping track of like every single last item, or they would find out months later. And so long story short, we were doing this, and we were making, quite a bit of pocket of change to each of us. And then one day my mom calls me up and she's like, the police are on the line and they have a hidden video camera saying that they have you caught stealing at the suit store that you're working at. I'm like, Mom, come on, that's BS. And so I call up my boys. I'm like, yo, what's going on? And they're like, yo, this girl ratted us out that works with us. And I was like, well, do they really have the hidden video cameras of us stealing? And they were like, nah, they're just BSing. They just want us to confess. I was like, all right, cool. So I called the police myself, and I'm just like, this is like San Jose PD. I'm like, look, I know you guys are out for me. I know you guys are BSing. You guys don't have no hidden video cameras in the store for the last 3 months of me stealing. That's a bunch of bullshit. So, you know, I'm not turning myself in, and you guys want to catch me, go ahead, catch me if you can. So they were like, we're coming out for a warrant out for your arrest. This is your third strike, because I was already arrested before. I was already on probation. And I was just like, all right, come. And then so I hang up the phone, and I just had this weird moment. Because number one, my mom's like this hardcore praying Christian Chinese mom, right? She's crying every day. I'm now, you know, about to get arrested again. You know, I'm at my third high school. I almost died twice, right? And I just thought to myself, like, what am I doing with my life, right? I'm about to be a senior. I'm about to, you know, turn almost legally 18 in a year. And I just had this weird thought in my head, like, I need to get myself right. And I had everything. Like, I had a nice rice rocket. I had, you know, I had like thousands of dollars, which in my mind was like a lot of money, right? And, you know, I had gang friends, I had hip hop friends, you know, the whole thing. And I was just like, why do I feel so empty? Why do I feel like there's a hole, like a gaping hole in my heart? And so I went into my room, I opened the closet, and I took out all the suits I had left, right? And I put them into 2 big garbage bags. And I told my friend, take me police station. And my friend was just like, yo, man, you're tripping. He's like, why are you trying to like get clean and get right? Like, if you want to get right, then just turn in a couple shirts. You know, it's not grand theft. You know what I'm saying? But he's like, with your record, you're gonna spend time in juvie, and then you're gonna get transferred over to the, you know, to the big jail. And I was just like, nah, just leave me alone. I'm just trying to figure this out. So he drops me off a mile away from San Jose PD. And I just had this come to Jesus moment. I didn't know what to do. So I called my mom, and I'm like, Mom, I just gotta be honest. I did it. And I really did. I stole, and I feel horrible about it. And I just want to tell the truth, because I feel like I need to do what's right. And she was like, well, what do you want to do? I was like, I don't know. What do you think I should do? She's like, well, I don't want you to go to jail. And I'm just like, Mom, so then should I lie? Right? And she was just like, and I was like, and I hadn't been to church, like I said, in like 6 years. And I was just like, Mom, what do you think Jesus would do in this situation? Right. And my mom, like, just straight up being Chinese, Cantonese mom, she's like, Jaeson, Jesus don't steal. Okay. Right? And I'm just like, Mom, I know Jesus doesn't steal. I know he doesn't steal, but like, what would he want me to do? Oh, she's like, oh, okay. She's like, he probably turned himself in so he can get right with God, right? And I was just like, yeah, that sounds about right. I think I need to get right with God. I was like, you know what? I've been hurting not just others and myself. I've ran away from the Lord, right? And so I was like, you know what, Mom? That's what I'm gonna do. I need to get right with God, and I'm just gonna turn myself in and tell the truth, and come what may. And my mom was like, you know what? She says, just pray that God gives you mercy, and the cop grants you mercy, and that, you know, somehow he answers. And so I went in, I turned myself in, and right when the cop looked at me, he knew who I was. I guess I checked in, and then he was like, you're Jaeson Ma. I'm like, yeah. And he's like pulling out his cuffs, ready to cuff me, but he sees me with 2 giant garbage bags full of suits. So he's kind of bewildered, like, what's this? And I'm like, he's like, come back to the back room. So I pull out every suit, pour them on the table. And he's like, why are you doing this? And I was like, I'm just trying to get my life right. And he was like, no, why are you doing this? I was like, all right, it sounds weird, but I'm just trying to get my life right with God. This is everything I have with me that's stolen. There's probably stuff out there I can still try to find and get, but, you know, I just want to come clean. And then he was like, he was like, and I still remember, he was a Korean cop. I forgot why I knew he was Korean. And, you know, most Koreans in California are Christians, right? So I was just like, he's like, I've never done this in 20 years of my police career. He's like, but I felt like I heard a voice in my head tell me there's something different about you, and I need to give you a second chance. And I was just like, what? Right? I was like, hallelujah. I was just like, what? I was like, what? And so he was just like, look, I'm not going to take you to jail tonight, so you don't have to post bail. You don't have to go to juvie. But he was like, looking at your court record, 99% chance when I turn this into the DA, you're still going to have to go to jail, but I'm letting you go for now. And I was like, sir, that's like a big enough miracle for me. I don't need anything else. And so he lets me go. And then the real kind of, I guess, I call it providence happens, right? Like it's not something you can plan. It's like something orchestrated by the universe, God, So they lost my court case for 6 months. So during those
That's some California shit right there.
California shit. That's like whacked out, horrible organizational system, right? So this is like, remember, I'm born in 1980, so this is like analog days. There's no apps, there's no software, there's no UI UX. So it's like literally filing, right? Like, so somehow they move me to another chief ranking probation officer. They lose my case for 6 months. Normally, I get a letter in the mail within 2 weeks that says you got to go to court, and here's your date, and I get ready. Okay, whatever. So this time, during those 6 months, why I say it's providence is it gave me time to change my direction in life. So I literally busted a 180, and I went from Asian wannabe thug, Asian wannabe rapper, Asian wannabe like thespian punk kid to a Jesus freak, right? And I started. So I went from straight F's and D's to like straight A's. I started washing the dishes. I started becoming, good with my moms, right? I started bringing all my friends to these Billy Graham crusade. I remember I brought like 100 of my friends to the Lord. I started this hip hop Bible study. I mean, I just fully went 180. And I think word on the street was like, Jason's changed. Like he's a different dude, right? And people were bugging out, right? And I threw away, I remember I had like a few marijuana plants in my backyard that I was growing. And it's a funny story. So this is like one of my first businesses. And my mom was just like, what is this? I'm like, it's my science project. Right? It's like, oh, move to the backyard. It's so stinky. Right? and so I literally, I remember tossing them, and then my friends came and grabbed it, and they're like, "You're not wasting the weed." And then I move on. Long story short was 6 months later, I got a letter in the mail, and it says you got to go to court. So I'm like, oh wow, okay. So now I'm at my fourth high school. I'm at Piedmont Hills High, and I'm at my fourth high school, and now I'm a totally changed person. And I'm a good student. I'm a good, I'm just doing good. And I go, well, I guess I'm gonna go to jail. So in my head, I was like, I'm going to start my jail ministry. I'm going to tell people about Jesus in jail. And so I went to the, my parole officer, went to the public defender, had no real lawyer. And I was just like, I confess, I stole over $100,000 worth of goods, and just, take me. Right. And so we go to, we go to court, and the judge looks at me and says, Jason, this is a very unique case. We know that you pleaded guilty. But we want to investigate it more, come back in a month. I was like, but I pleaded guilty. And he's like, we know. So I was like, okay. So I come back in a month, and he's like, Jason, we want to investigate this case more in depth. We're putting 2 more lawyers to investigate it more. Come back in another month. I'm like, okay. So now this is like spring of like 1998, right? This is like my senior year in high school. And I remember I was a thespian. I loved acting, right? And so I was always acting on the side, right? And I didn't let my gang friends or my hip hop friends know, right? So like I'm part of this white club, right?
Yeah.
Like this white drama Illuminati club. And so I was the lead for a famous musical called Fiddler on the Roof, right? Yeah. So I was Tevye, this fat Jewish, if I were a rich man. So anyway, so I was so scared to tell my drama teacher, her name was Miss Gassman, that I would possibly be in jail the week of our musical opening, right? So I literally got scared. I finally confessed to her, got the balls to confess to her, and I was like, Miss Gassman, you might want to get the understudy ready, because next Friday I might be in jail. And I didn't know how to tell this to you. And she's like, what are you talking about, right? And she was like, I was like, and so the whole drama department was like, praying for me. It was like the craziest thing. And so
everyone was praying. They were just like praying that you wouldn't go to jail so that they could do the play.
Yes, exactly. So, and we had, she's a very she was like in soap opera. So she's like super Hollywood spiritual. So she's like, everyone hold your hands, we're praying to the universe, the whole thing. Right. So Jason believes in Jesus. We can pray to him. We can pray to the tree. You know, it's all good, right? So, and so like everyone's like saying their own prayers, and it's like the force of prayer, right? You kind of just never know, right? And so I go to court, and it's my third time, and the judge looks at me and he says, Jason, we made a decision, and we decided you can go. You can go free. And I was like, what do you mean I can go free? I don't have to go to jail? He's like, nah. I was like, do I have to pay the company back money? He was like, no. I was like, look, I've been arrested before. Tell me I got community service hours. And he was like, no community service hours. I was like, what about my probation officer? And he was like, when you walk out this courtroom, she'll no longer be your probation officer. I said, I can just get up and leave like nothing ever happened. And he was like, just get out of here, man. You're good. And I was just like, shocked, right, to this day, right? 20 years later, when I think about the story, or 20 plus years later, I was literally given a blank check, and you know, I was shown mercy, right, in the sense of like I didn't get something I deserved, or grace. And so I remember just walking out that courtroom, just like I looked up to the sky. I remember it was San Jose PD, downtown LA, and I was walking out, and it was like birds were chirping, skies are blue, clouds were white, sun was shining, and I was just like, God, you're like the nicest dude I've ever met in my life. And I was just like, I'm going to get out the driver's seat. I'm going to get in the passenger seat, and you just take the wheel and wherever you want my life to go. And I still remember something I did say in my head when I walked out that courtroom free. I was like, God, you know, I don't know what can you do with my life. I said, but I know that I can talk. And I said, if you can use, you know, me to, you know, to share with other young people like me that have problems and can have a second chance, you know, please use me in that way. And then everything kind of just started happening. It was kind of crazy, you know. I mean, there was a lot of stories behind, you know, how I ended up becoming a youth pastor, and then a missionary, and then getting into venture capital, and then MC Hammer, and you know. But you know, one thing I will say that I've never shared on a podcast is crazy story. So whether people are spiritual or not, it's just whether you believe it doesn't matter. It's just something that happened to me. So when I was 15, and I was at the height of my shenanigans, I was just a wild child, right? I was just a punk ass troublemaking kid. My oldest sister is like super prophetic. And what I mean by that is she sees the future, right?
Yeah.
And she'll tell me, and ever since I was a kid, she would tell me shit and it would come true, right? So she would be like, I still remember plain as day one time, she was like, don't ride your bike tomorrow, and don't go to your friend's house, because there's going to be another car that's going to come and it's going to nip you and you're going to break your leg. And I was just like, okay. Right? Yeah. And of course it happens, right? And so my sister—
Wait, you broke your leg? Exactly like as you said.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Literally went around outside the court, turned the corner, going to the next street, car comes, nips, boom, I hit off my bike, break my leg. Right? So my sister would say stuff that would just freak me out, right? Because I always just thought my sister knew that I was looking at porn. She knew that I was like, you know,
she's in your head.
She was in my head, right? But she was like she had this gift, right? So she could see stuff, right? And so one time when I was 15, she came back from some church prayer meeting, and this is at the height, like I said, of my troublemaking. And she goes, Jason, wake up. And I remember I was high, I was on the couch, and she wakes me up and she's like, wake up. And I'm like, what's going on? She was like, God took me to heaven and I saw your book of life. And I was like, okay. And she was like, and it was huge. And I was like, okay. And I was like, in my head, I asked her, I was like, so really? Okay. I was like, what you smoking, right? But I was just like, was I rich? Was I famous? I was like, did I make $1 million? Right? I was like, did I become a famous rapper? Like, I was asking her, like, in my head a bunch of questions. She was like, no, Jason. She's like, you're gonna be a youth pastor. And I was like, youth pastor? I was like, hell no, I'm not gonna be no youth pastor, right? She's like, well, I also saw that you have like you made rap songs and they reached millions of people. And I was just like, all right, that sounds a little better, right? But then my mom was like in the kitchen listening and washing dishes, like, oh yeah, Jason gonna be youth pastor, Jason gonna be youth pastor. And because like my mom was just happy that I wasn't in trouble, right? She wasn't
Yeah.
like the type of Chinese parent, like, oh, get straight A's. She just wanted me to not go to jail, right? So fast forward back to my story. Okay, I'm out of San Jose PD. I started this hip hop Bible study in East San Jose. And so what had happened was I was trying to think, how do I get my druggy friends, my thespian friends, and my Southeast Asian, Cambodian, Vietnamese gang friends to find God, right? And find Jesus. And so my Chinese church in the East Side San Jose on Tuesday night was empty. And so I told the Chinese pastor, yo, let me have the church on Tuesday, and I'm going to do a Bible study for inner city youth. And I'm going to let them study the Bible for an hour. That's a prerequisite. And after that, they can use the church auditorium to break dance, to DJ, to rap, to whatever, you know, like do whatever. And so he was cool with it. Long story short was it blew up to hundreds of youth every Tuesday night. So if you actually know some of the original founding members of Jabberwockies, like Floor Rockers, like DJs and rappers that all are famous now came out of that little hip hop Bible study back in the day. I used to have DJs and all that. So that's what led me to meet my mentor in life, MC Hammer.
Yeah.
And anyways, I'm just going to talk the origin story. So what happened was a lot of people asked me, like, how'd you get into venture capital? How'd you get into tech? How'd you get into media? And so when I was having this hip hop Bible study, MC Hammer had just left Death Row Records. And not a lot of people remember he was signed to Death Row for like for a short stint right after he left Capitol. And so he actually witnessed Tupac die right in Vegas at that night.
He was there.
It was him, it was Suge, and it was Pac. Now, what happened was, because they knew there was a hit, and this is a story that Hammer had told me many times, he went to the club after the fight, right, to go and meet up with Suge and Pac with all their gang, right? And they were like strapped, like ready. And then he told me that they were waiting. Of course, they didn't come. And the next thing they do, they walk outside on the strip and they see that, you know, the cops doing the S line down the strip. And then he was like, damn, like he knew something that went down. Pac got hit. So he spent a week at the hospital with Pac before he passed away. And so what he told me was, like, during that time, he was the only one there, like, protecting the Pac in the fort. Everyone else had dispersed. And that's when he had his come to Jesus moment. So he had, a lot of people know MC Hammer was actually a born again Holy Ghost minister before he became MC Hammer. So he was in seminary, and it was while he was in seminary, his wife was like, don't waste the gift God's given you. You've been given a gift to rap and dance. You need to do Hammer time. But before that, he started the first Christian rap group called the Holy Ghost Boys. But anyway, so he went and became Hammer, and then went to Death Row. And then after witnessing, you know, this tragic murder, he basically told me, like, he had his awakening, right, and came back to God. And so he took his masters from Suge, and he drove up back to the Bay and just, you know, repented and became a born again preacher. And so he started preaching at this big mega church in San Jose where I live, about 30 minutes from my house, called Jubilee. And every Sunday night, MC Hammer would do a men's Bible study. I mean, you just can't get doper than that, right?
That must have been huge.
It was 3,000 men.
Yeah.
So like every Sunday night, I'm there, right? And I'm listening to MC Hammer talk about the Bible, right? I'm just like, this is the greatest thing in history, right? And so what happened was, once a year, I would do a hip hop outreach, like a hip hop Bible study outreach. And so it would be like, it was just like a hip hop show. It was like Rolling Loud, but like very small scale, like 3,000 kids. But for me, that was a lot, right? And so we have DJs perform, rappers perform, B-boys, you know, all of that. We do sketches and all that. So I was like, yo, how dope would that be if I got MC Hammer to come speak at this event and inspire the youth, you know, to get off the drugs and get off the streets and get out the gangs. And so I chased him down for 6 months, and I couldn't get to him. And it was like 2 weeks before the event, and I was ready to give up. But I just kept trying every single Sunday night, trying to get through the bodyguards, through security, through his assistants. And then I finally got to him. And I remember him just looking at me, and I told him what I want to do. And he was like, you know what? I'm down. I'll come and speak. And I was just like super relieved and thankful. And then I think he kind of looked at me, just saw my hustle, and he was just like, "So, young man, what do you do?" And I was like, "What do I do? What do you mean, like where I work?" And he was like, "Yeah, what do you do? You working anywhere?" And I was like, "Well, I work at this startup in Cupertino across from Apple. We sell websites for small businesses." And it was this little e-commerce, it was called e-commerce tech, I remember, on Deanza and Stevens Creek. And he was like, "Startups?" He's like, "I invest in startups." He goes, "I'm a venture capitalist." He goes, "Why don't you quit your job and come work for me? You're Asian. You must know how to use computers. Come to my office tomorrow." And I was like, MC Hammer? I was like, "Oh, hell no." Wow. I was out of my mind. So the next week I quit my job. And, there I was in his office in Tracy, California. I still remember I was 17 years old. And he was telling me, "Jason, look at this. Everything's Bluetooth, wireless, no cords. We're laying fiber optics." He's like, "We're going to MCI Global Crossing this week, and we're gonna deliver rich content over fiber." And I was just like, "What's this dude talking about?" Right?
He was ahead of the tech curve.
Way ahead, right? And he was like, "Hollywood's going down, music industry's going down, rich content, digital distribution." He says, "Hollywood's coming to Silicon Valley." And this is like 1997, 1998, right? And of course, he becomes best friends with this guy named Ron Conway. And so if those of you watching don't know who Ron Conway is, he's the quote unquote the godfather of angel investment, created the term, angel investment, right? So I always say that Ron wanted to be cool and Hammer wanted to get into tech. And so basically they became bosom buddies. And because of SV Angels and Hammer being best friends with Ron and being unofficially an advisor, right, to SV, we just saw everything. Like we literally saw everything. And I'm sure you've heard about Hammer, being in the scene. Like he was the first celebrity in Silicon Valley that really leveraged his celebrity to get into venture capital and early tech.
Yeah, Ron would bring him around to Y-Combinator demo day, like all the time. And like MC Hammer would be there and people were like, what is going on? Like, why is this guy here? And yeah, he was out there making investments, and it was like a badge of honor to get MC Hammer to invest in your company, because then you had like a celebrity, Yeah,
it was all before, the Warriors were investing. I still remember like Hammer, I used to drive him around to every meeting. So I drove him to the YC meeting. I drove him to San Mateo when we met YouTube. And it was literally Steve and Chad and the guys above a pizza parlor. I still remember it was like dial-up phones, like rats in the office, and like 5 guys, right? And Hammer's like, "Jason, there's a company called YouTube, man. They're uploading content to servers. We're going to start creating content with our camera." And I'm just like, "Yo, that's so lame." I was like, because this is like 2004 or something like that, right? We were talking still, there's like $1 million Britney Spears music videos, right? And then like Hammer's having me like have this Casio camera, like recording him in the back alley, and it looks so bad, right? It's like user generated content, you know what I'm saying? And he was like, we're gonna upload it to YouTube. And I'm like, all right. And so it was just crazy. Like I remember, and then he met with Dorsey, and I remember it was like few guys at Twitter at the time, and he was like, "Jason, this new thing, Twitter, you want to type 140 words or less, 140 characters or less." But I was telling them today, like, why don't you use this for threading and like asking questions? You can create conversations on the Twitter thread. And I'm just like, "Oh, that's interesting," right? And it was just so beyond his time. And I just had those window in as this young kid to just see the evolution of Silicon Valley 2.0. And that led me to my passion, which was making content, telling stories, right? And specifically between East and West, and Asia and America. And so I told the story before, but I still remember. It was basically Hammer was at CES. I think it was like 1999 or 2000. I don't remember his exact year, but he was checking out high-tech cameras in Vegas at CES, and he bumps into a young Asian American director named Jaeson Lin.
Yeah.
And so Justin's like fresh out of UCLA, or maybe what's still been his senior year in UCLA, I don't remember. And I just remember Hammer telling me the story, and he's just like, "Hammer, I'm paraphrasing, this is like what Hammer tells me, but he's like, I'm making my first or second Asian American independent film. It's called Better Luck Tomorrow. And he's like, I'm sick and tired of like Asians being called geishas and goonies and gangsters and geeks, basically stereotyped, right? And he's like, I'm making this real, true life story based on this homicide in Orange County in Sunny Hills High, and it's gonna be all Asian cast, and I'm directing it, and I just want to, just stay in touch with you. And so Hammer gives him his number, and 3 months later, I remember we're in the Bay Area, and Hammer gets this phone call, and it's basically Justin crying out for help. And he's just basically like, I maxed out 10 credit cards. My parents lent me all their money. I'm down to nothing. And they're going to repossess all our film equipment in the morning if we don't get X amount of money in the bank, like tomorrow. And like, Hammer, I don't know who else to call. Hammer, can you help me? Right. And and I always joke with Hammer. I'm just like, remember when I told you, I was like, you have to help my Asian people, right? He's like, nah, you didn't say that. And I'm not, and then, but whatever, the thing was, he always tells a story that people ask him why he did it, but he said that he just saw destiny in Justin's eyes, and he just went to the bank, I remember, and he just wired the cash.
Yeah.
And didn't look back, nothing signed, no contract, no agreement, just wired him the cash, saved Better Luck Tomorrow.
Right. It changed Justin's career forever. I mean, now he's one of the hottest, biggest directors
in Hollywood, right? And so we didn't hear from Justin for a good year, right? And so we didn't know, like,
that shit is gone. That money is gone.
I was like, this sounds like some Asian thug shit. You know what I'm saying? This is some shit I would have done, right? Like, Hammer, I need some money, right? And so anyway, so we didn't know if he had ran away with the money. We didn't know if the film ever got made. We didn't know anything. And so I'm in the office one day, and then I'm online, and I see this article, and it's Sundance Film Festival. Roger Ebert gives 2 thumbs up to young Asian American director Justin Lin's film, Better Luck Tomorrow. And I'm like, Hammer, isn't this that dude that we invested in? And that's his movie. He's like, no, Justin? Calls up Justin, like, Justin's on the other line. I think they were in Park, I forgot whether in Park City or in LA at the time. They're just like freaking out because like this is right when all the hoopla was going on and all the hype was going on. And next thing you know, gets picked up at MTV Films, and Viacom's going to distribute it. So me and Hammer fly down to LA for the Asian American Film Festival, the VC Film Festival, for the premiere. And I'm like 19 years old. I don't even remember how old. I was like 19, 20 years old. And I'm just sitting there, and it's young Justin Lin. It's Sung Kang, right? The Korean heartthrob in Fast and Furious that dies and comes back every other franchise.
Yeah.
Right? It's John Cho's first real, like major film, right? And Harold and Kumar. It's Jason Tobin's first film, which is now he's in Justin Lin's Cinemax Warrior, right? And so it was like this, and of course Karen Anna Chung, she was like this, beautiful, like young, just graduated from UCLA, Asian American actress, and I just saw the magic, right? And I'm watching this movie, and I'm just like, Asian, and I'm American, and I see this movie that's just dope. It's just like a dope ass film. Like, this was not Crazy Rich Asians. This was like BLT. Like, this was some like Reservoir Dogs for Asian Americans. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I was just like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Like, I want to represent Asian culture in mainstream media the right way. And I want to use media to change people's perception about my skin color and who I am and how they treat me and how people look at me. And so that's what I did. I still remember, I took Karen to her, I don't know if it was her first or second agent meeting, but I still remember it was Edmund's agency. It doesn't exist anymore. And she got signed. She got signed, and it was too early. This is like 2002, right? And there's no Crazy Rich Asian, there's no Farewell, there's no 88 Rising, there's none of this, there's no K-pop, right? And so, it was like Asians in Hollywood, it was still like this really, really uphill battle, right? But Justin, of course, was always true to the game and an OG, like to this day, that was like the Asian American Rat Pack, right? And they came out and they became all they became and paved the way for people like myself and others. But anyways, so going back, I told Hammer after doing Venture for a few more years, I was like, I really want to pursue this mission and this dream. I want to go to UCLA or USC. I want to get my my master's in film and television. I want to represent Asian culture in mainstream media. And he was like, go for it. And so I went to go tell my pastor, this very conservative, Cantonese pastor. And I was like, Pastor Poon, I was like, I think God's calling me to Hollywood. And he goes, oh, that is not God calling you to Hollywood. He was like, that is the devil talking to you. He was like, that is Satan calling you to Hollywood. And I was just like, yo, nah. And he was like, no, you are called to third world missions. You are called to Africa. You're called to India. I was like, China. I was like, you're kidding me, man. I'm not doing no missionary work. I'm not going to go to Bible college. You crazy? And he was like, no, this is God calling for you. And so I was like super conflicted. And probably the best advice I ever got was, I still remember, it was like 4 a.m. in the studio in Fremont, California. And I call Hammer Pastor, right? Because he was my mentor. And I was just like, Pastor, what should I do? I was like, I got Hollywood in one hand. I got missionary work in the other, like Bible college. I'm like, I don't know what to do. I feel conflicted. I don't want to like not do God's work, right? And she was like, Jaeson, Hollywood's always going to be there. He said, if you go to Hollywood in the spiritual state you're in right now, those demons will eat you up and won't come out alive. And he's like, if I were you, I'd lay a strong spiritual foundation, build your character, do God's work, serve the poor. And if God calls you back to Hollywood, we'll still be there. And I was just like, it sounds like wisdom to me. So I dropped everything. And then I went to seminary. And then I got, I got a business degree. I got a postmodern youth culture degree. And then I got a biblical studies degree. And then I went on to get a master's in global leadership. And long story short, I became a missionary for almost 5 years in 40 countries.
Wow. Wow. That's such a really good advice. So often, we think that this is our shot. We got to do what we want to do right now. Like we have to go to Hollywood right now, or like start that startup right now, or there's never going to be an opportunity. And, it's always going to be there. And so how did you became a missionary for 5 years? What years was this?
This was 2002 to about 2007. Yeah, 2002 to about 2007.
And one thing,
yeah.
So tell me, like, was this the time you mentioned this before when we did a little call last week? But like, is this when you started performing exorcisms?
Yeah, not by choice, but by happenstance. It got really interesting. You want to talk about spirituality, like, to me, we are triune beings. We're body, soul, and spirit, right? Obviously, we have our physical body, which we eat, sleep, and drink every day. Our soul is our mind, our will, and our emotions, right? That's what makes up our personality. But our spirit is what lives on forever. And I think a lot of people don't pay attention or are aware or feed the spirit. And that's why most of the time it's dormant. We live within our soulish selves or our physical selves, right? We just want to eat, we want to drink, we want to sleep, we want to, have pleasure, we want to have fun, we want to have sex, we want to, whatever it is, right? It's a very hedonistic, experience of how we find happiness in life. But I think for me, I realized as I became a missionary full time and I went to Bible college and I started meditating every day. That was my thing. Like I actually didn't like to study. I didn't like to read, but I like to pray. I like to meditate. It was like I'm Myers-Briggs. I'm an ENFJ, so I'm very feeling oriented. I'm not your normal Asian dude. Like I'm not logical. I don't think with my left brain. I think with my right brain, right? And so I just loved meditating and contemplating and having these prayer times. And so I would meditate for like 2-4 hours straight at a time, and I would get caught up in these very existential experiences. I would start seeing things. I would start feeling things. I'd start feeling the presence of God. I would start feeling like electricity. I would have it, like very, very heightened awareness of sensations, right, in the spiritual level. And through that, I started getting into a lot of books that I was reading, whether it was contemplative prayer from like Christian mystics, all the way to books about how to cast out devils and heal the sick and raise the dead. And then, of course, things started happening around me where just a lot of weird things started happening. That people started asking me to ghost bust. And so I just, and it wasn't something I asked for. It just happened, right? And so I don't know. I don't want to get, I can get into details, but I probably had hundreds, you know, for sure, hundreds, if not thousands, that under the ministry, we've seen people delivered from actual demonic possession or demonic torment. Like, you know, some people say, oh, it's just like voices in your head, right? Or someone's schizophrenic, or someone has disassociated personalities. Sure, there's a physical and medical term for it, but not a lot of people believe that or understand that there's actually a spiritual component, right? And that's why when you see people commit suicide, a lot of times they say they heard a voice, or they said something, or they were going through all this mental, you know, conflict. A lot of times those are demons talking to them. And if you believe in that, right? If you're a scientist and you don't believe in the spirit, then that's something, you're an atheist, you don't believe in that. But if you're someone that believes in the spiritual realm and angels and demons or ghosts or, you know, different entities, then that's something very, very real. So anyway, so what happened was I just became, I would say, like, I saw many people healed of crazy diseases, from people that were like paralyzed that could walk again when I was in India and Nepal, to someone that had cancer that was just like completely just removed right before your eyes. But for me, what I saw the most of, because I think that was like my God-given spiritual gift, was deliverance, which in our terminology means you know, exorcisms or ghost busting. So it was a really interesting time in my life, for sure.
How do you deliver somebody? I mean, like, what is the actual process of, like, okay, they're having voices in their head or going through some, you know, being affected by some external force, and then what's the process? I'm just so curious, you know?
So not a lot of people know I wrote a book.
Yeah.
That was published in 2007, called The Blueprint. And I actually have a chapter that I wrote that actually describes succinctly like 10 steps to cast out a devil. And actually I used to train missionaries around the world on how to do deliverance. And so I guess the best way to learn is always just through a story, through experience. So I'll actually tell this, if you don't mind. I can tell you the first time I did an exorcism. This is the first time, right? So I was actually not even, this is before, it was during the time I just started working with Hammer. I was still a teenager. I think I was like 19. And I had started praying every day for like 2, 3, 4 hours a day. I read through the Bible twice at that time. I was, you know, just really, really into spiritual practices. And then at the same time, I was still working for Hammer and going to school. And I remember going to my friend's house for his birthday party. It was a Sunday afternoon. It was after church in East San Jose. His name was Josh Kidwell, I still remember. And when I went to his house, I would sometimes feel so full of the Spirit. Like I'd feel so full of the Holy Spirit. In Christian terms, you know, we call it, you know, filled with the Spirit, right? So I was so full. I felt so much energy, like spiritual energy inside of me that was from outside. And I started praying in tongues, and I didn't know why. And so tongues is in biblical terms, it's a prayer language that's given by God from heaven, that's innate in every human being. It's basically your spiritual language, right? It's like, but it only is released through you when you become spiritually awoken, right? Yeah. And so I was praying in tongues. I didn't know why, but there was something upon me that was like, you need to pray. And so I didn't know what I was praying for, but I was walking around the neighborhood just praying in tongues. And after about like 30 minutes praying in the Spirit, I get this phone call. And it's this kid that had gone to my hip hop Bible study, but he was part of this Filipino Catholic church that was maybe about 15 minutes away from the house that I was at for my friend's B-Day. And he was like, Jason, you know, we're Catholic, we know you're Christian, but we don't know what to do. There's this kid during our youth service, and he's like manifesting, and he's like throwing people like dolls left and right, and he's like got this crazy voice, and we don't know what's going on, but we think there's like some spirit or demon in him or something going on. And I was like, why are you calling me? I was like, what? I was like, homie, what? Right? Like, I've been in gang fights, you know, I've been shot at, like, not trying to cast out no demon, right? Not trying to fight no demon. And so he's like, you got to come help us. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know what to do. And he was like, well, he's like, you know, you're Christian. I think you might know better, like what to do. So I drive over there, and I still remember it was like this little community center Catholic hall place. And it was like, I guess they had like a youth group or something. And there's like, you know, like fold out chairs. And when I get there, in the back of the room, there's probably like 6 or 7 or 8 people around this kid. And this kid's got to be like 16, 17 years old, but he's big. He's like he was a football player. Remember, he went to my high school, Independence High. And he was just being held down by like 6 kids, these 6 Filipino kids. And he's just like, and just like crazy ass noises coming out of his mouth. Like, you know, this is back in the day, because we're older. You know, remember Sega Genesis, the game Ultra Beast, right? Yeah. So it was like Ultra Beast, right? He was just like, right? And I was just like, what the fuck? Right? I was like, what is this, right? And so they're like holding him down, and he had a pen in his hand, and they're trying to get the pen out of his hand because he had tried to cut himself, right, a few times in the wrist. So I was like, okay. And so they're like, oh, Jaeson, thank you for coming. Like, can you please help him? And then they're like, you know, we don't know. I was like, you know what, just bring him into that. So there was like a corridor. There was like a entrance door, and then there was a corridor, and then there was another door into the community hall. So they put him in this corridor. I went in. I thought they were going to come with me. They all closed the door and leave me in there with him alone. Okay.
It's like shut you in with the beast.
Yeah, and I'm just like, oh, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die. So I literally remember a kid, and he was kind of just like in and out of himself. And again, I had never casted out the devil. I'd never done an exorcism in my life, right? And so but I read books. I studied Jesus's, you know, exorcisms. I've read the Bible twice at that point. So there was stuff inside of me that I had just not put to work, right? And so immediately he looks at me, and I hear him just like kind of growling and snarling. And so I'm just like, in the name of Jesus Christ, right? I'm just like, devil come out, right? And all of a sudden he just like reacts like, and he just like comes after me and just starts swinging, right? And I'm just like, yo, so I like duck, and then all of a sudden, I don't know what came over my head, but I was like, I command you, demon, to be silent, right? And all of a sudden he just like, and he can't like speak, right? And then all of a sudden, like inside my human self, I was scared. I thought I was gonna like die, right? But it was like the spirit of God came over me, and I became a different person, right? In Christian terminology, we call it the anointing, right? Something came over me at that moment. I was no longer myself. Like it was God's spirit on my spirit, and basically, like I'm just now like just going with. I somehow just know what
you're in it. Yeah,
I'm just in it. I just know what, I'm just in the zone, right? So I'm just like, be silent. And I was like, what's your name, right? And I'm like asking the demon for its name, right? And then it's like, it starts like saying some crazy ass language I never heard before, like straight from the pit of hell, right? And then I'm like, I don't want to speak to you. I want to speak to him, right? And I forgot what his name was. And I was like, so I bound the spirit, and I called forth the person, and the kid comes back out, and he goes, what's going on? He's like, what's going on? And he's like talking to me. He's like, help me. He's like, it wants to kill me. It wants to kill me. He's like, help me. And then all of a sudden it's like goes backwards. And then like the demon comes back into him. He's like, he's mine. And then all of a sudden I see him fighting with himself. This is the crazy part, right? So he starts like one fist is like this, and he's about to throw a fist at me. And then he catches it midair with his own hand. And he's like, no. Right? And I'm like, whoa, right? And so I'm just like, so at that point, I was like, I forgot, was it spirit of anger or unforgiveness? And I was like, spirit of anger, unforgiveness. I was like, in the name of Jesus, I command you to come out. And then he just flipped out, grabbed his hand, turned around, and threw it straight into this fire extinguisher and broke his hand on the spot. Broke his hand starts bleeding, the kid starts crying, but then like this demon still kind of like in him. And then at that point, I started talking to him because he was like weakened. And I was like, and I started reading the scriptures. I had my Bible with me, and I was like, there was a scripture where Jesus casted out this multiple demons out of this. They call it the demonized boy in the catacombs. So there was a boy in the Bible in the New Testament that lived in the caves because he was so demon possessed, and no one in town would go near the cave because this kid was so possessed. Everyone was scared of him, but this father asked and begged Jesus, was like, you're the only one that can cast these demons out of my son. And so long story short was I read that story to him, and I was just like, do you believe that Jesus, you know, can save you from this darkness and from these demons? And are you willing to let go of your unforgiveness and let go of your anger and repent and receive Christ? And at that point, I had bound the demon so that it couldn't speak. And then I then talked to the kid, and he basically said a prayer of repentance with me. And then the moment he forgave his parents, it was actually his parents that he was very angry at. Boom! I could see it in his eyes. Like his eyes went from like almost being fully flipped back to normal. You could tell that this presence had just lifted out of his body, and he literally, I kid you not, fell asleep. Like he literally just like knocked out. And then I knew the demon was gone. And so immediately we called the ambulances. They come and get him, you know, they stitch him up, and then we bring him back to his house. I still remember he lived 2 blocks behind Independence High School. And I went back to his house. And I know this sounds random, and some people may think this is all baloney, but when you cast out devils, you have to look for what the entrance was. Like how did they get in, right? So normally there's a few ways it gets in, right? It's a lot of times it's unforgiveness, bitterness, anger that people are holding on to, right? Other times it's trauma or fear. They have some crazy moment. Like there's moments where people get in a car accident, all of a sudden something jumps in them, right? But there's this moment of fear. And then there's people, places, and things. So it can be transferred from someone else. It could be like you're in the red light district of Bangkok, and you're like, something feels dark here. You know what I'm saying? So demons can crowd in dark places, and then there's objects, right? There's actual things, like if people give power to an object, a spirit can actually, that's why you see paranormal activity, right? In movies and stuff like that, people talk about that. So long story short was, I went to his house to ghost bust to find out like what was going on, found out that him and his dad had this whole bad relationship, and he was angry about his father. But I go into his room, and his room is filled with Spawn, the comic book.
Yeah,
that's right. And it's just like everywhere, like his whole room is filled with Spawn. And I'm just like, something feels fucking off here, right? And so I'm like, so I go under his bed, and I find like these crazy like black magic books, right? And like the Satanic Bible, like all this weird shit, right? And he got into, I think, through just being a fanboy of Spawn and just going into like a darker hole, right? Because Spawn was like the son of Satan or whatever, right? And so anyway, so long story short was, I was like, yo, we need to clean all this out. He comes back from the hospital, and he's like back in his right mind. And I still remember to this day, we went and we took everything, we burned it, went into his driveway, held hands with his parents, and the whole family, you know, gave their life to Christ and found the Lord. And so that was like my first exorcism. Wow. And then there's literally like 100 other stories like that, right? It was just crazy, right? Because I would see crazier stuff like in Indonesia, crazier stuff in India, crazier stuff in Africa, you know, and in South America. And so anyway, you know, that was a reality for me. I was completely 100% given to spirituality and mission work, you know, and I just gave it everything. And then it wasn't until 2006 I burned out. You know, I mean, it was like after sleeping in so many bushes and so many trees and so many couches and just, you know, living on nothing and eating whatever was before me in different countries, which was an amazing experience, but I just burned out. I was done, and I was like, you know, I just can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And I checked myself into a Christian rehab, and that was when I was trying to just make sense of whatever happened the last 5 years of my life. And then I found my calling to go back into media entertainment.
Back to Hollywood.
Back to Hollywood, exactly.
Oh my God, dude, that is a crazy story. I wish there was a book. You should write a book of all of these stories, or like it should be a movie, man. That is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, when I really think back about the stuff that I've experienced, it's just so out there that most people would like. Today, you know, I work in, you know, entertainment and media. I don't talk about this stuff, like, you know, like it was. I remember one time I was at this Hollywood event, and I remember I was with three major agents from major talent agencies that were, you know, my clients, right? They represented some talent that I had represented at the time, and you know, they're typical Jewish agents, right? And super Hollywood event, and then some girl that somehow went to one of my revival meetings like 10 years back, right? And she's somehow now in Hollywood working in the entertainment industry. And then she sees me at this event, and I'm with like these three top agents, like, and she's just like, "Oh, Pastor Jaeson Ma," right? And she's just like, "You changed my life," and blah blah blah. And you see like three of these agents kind of looking at me like, "What?"
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, what? What are you talking about? You're a what? You're a pastor? And I was like, I was a missionary, you know, for 5 years. It's like, you know, like a Mormon was a missionary, you know? So I was just like, you know, I did this stint for like, you know, a few years. But it's just funny now that it's just, it is a very, I wouldn't say it's a foreign part, but that was definitely a segment of my life.
Yeah.
Right. That was very intense, very real, and very authentic and true. But that was a part of my life that is no longer, quote unquote, something I'm doing now. It to me, it's actually feels foreign in some ways. But yeah, have you seen the movie Constantine? That's like,
Yeah, I was just thinking that was you.
That was my rap alias. I have a rap alias. Is my rap alias is Constantine, because you know, I like to drink. I like to have my whiskey and cigars. You know, I'll smoke weed. You know, and at the same time, if I have to cast out a devil, I'll cast out a devil. You know what I'm saying? But I'm not your typical, you know, church going, you know, Christian, right? I sin a lot. So, you know, so I'm not that guy, right? But so I don't purport to be any more, you know, a pastor or missionary, because, you know, I think I've fallen from grace in that way. But you know, maybe I'm still trying to get my wings by casting out a few devils here and there, and find my way back to heaven.
All right. So, okay. So tell me about breaking into Hollywood then. So how did you, well, actually there was a little interlude I wanted to ask about first, which is like you started performing Christian hip hop at one point, right?
That's right.
And was that first and then you broke into Hollywood as a media exec, or was it kind of concurrently?
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
So that was first. There's actually another story that I've never told on a podcast that I think would be super interesting. So, so around 2006, I burn out from just crazy spirituality. It's just like, it's just too much, right? It's too insane. And I'm like I'm in a different city every other week. You know, I'm building schools and missions and casting out devils and preaching, and it's just praying, and it's just crazy, right? And so I just like burn out. And I get disillusioned a little bit with the organized side of church and ministry and Christianity. And I wasn't having that. I was never like a organizational type of person, right? I was always, I was a hustler, right? I was always just like independent, doing my thing, right? So I was like, I didn't believe in churches like buildings and programs and personalities. Like, you know, people wanted me to like build, you know, my own mega church. And I was like, nah, I don't believe that. I think church is about people. It's about 2 or 3 gathering, Jesus is with them. Like, you can be in a house, it could be in a park, it could be in an office building. It doesn't matter. It's where people are. That's church, right? That's spirituality, it's community, it's God and all that. So I didn't believe in the organization and the structure and the bureaucracy and the fundraising. I didn't believe in any of that, and I still don't. And so that's why church, quote unquote, was never for me in that way, the Western version of it, as we understand. And I think nowadays you see a lot of this crazy chaos with like big church personalities that fall from grace and end up in scandals and this and that and the third. And I understand that 100%, because at one point, I was kind of this poster child where I had 100,000 kids following me on Facebook, and I was struggling with my sexuality, right? I was struggling with porn. I was having sex with my girlfriend. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was like not doing the Christian thing, right? And so I got out of that performance cycle, which was, you have to be perfect. You have to be this perfect, holy thing on stage, and everyone is gonna follow you because you're perfect. And I'm just like, yo, you know what? None of us are perfect. We're all human. We all have brokenness, and we make mistakes, and we got our own issues. And that was part of me. I couldn't live up to that Christian persona. So I checked myself into a Christian rehab, and I was like, I just got to get out of this, right? And I was dealing with my own demons. So as I'm dealing with my own demons and I'm in this Christian rehab, something really interesting happens. And I'll say one thing that I think is very important, because up until that point, even though I was doing all this ministry work, I was still very performance oriented. And so to me, it was like, how many devils could I cast out? How many people could I save? How big of a crowd could I speak to? How many churches could I start? And I really found my identity in what I did versus who I was. And it wasn't until I went to this rehab center that this pastor, who's still my mentor today, was like, Jaeson, God doesn't care if you preach another sermon or you save another person or you never sin again. He just loves you because you're his son. And you aren't a preacher, you aren't a prophet, you aren't this exorcist, you're just God's son. You're just Jaeson Ma. And you can accept that and be free to be that. And that that rocked my world. Because I was like, I can just be me and just be loved. And not have to perform, and God's okay with that. And he was like, yeah, God doesn't need you. And I was just like, really? and so at that moment, I had this trigger that took away the guilt and the shame, and it allowed me to start exploring my creative side. So yeah,
that's amazing. I mean, the realization that your self-worth comes intrinsically. It's intrinsic. It's not because coming from anything that you're doing or anything is, that's such an important and powerful realization. And I think it's really great to hear that, like, it was something that even, I mean, not great, but like it plagued you even when you were doing something really good, right? For other people. It wasn't like you were spending your time just trying to like get rich or die trying anymore, selling drugs or whatever. Like, and then, your self-approval was coming from the outside world. It was you were spending your time doing good works, and your self-approval was still coming from those external factors, right? Those external things you were doing. And then it sounds like that waking up moment was, it actually comes from within. It's intrinsic to me. It's because of my relationship with God.
Exactly. And I think what you just noted is so important, because we can get lost doing good.
Yeah.
Which is really crazy, right? Mother Teresa, not a lot of people know, but she died her last 20 years. She wrote in her diary, it was found in her diary after she passed away, that she felt completely disconnected with God the last 20 years of her life, and she had lost the presence of God, and she got so caught up in just helping others, right, that she herself was not happy. And that to me was really, really interesting. As the scriptures say, it's not by grace that, is by grace that we're saved, not by works, so that no one can boast. That's really interesting if you think about that scripture. It's by grace that you're saved, not by your works, so that no one can boast. Yeah. Right? So it's like, we think, look at what I've given to charity. Look at all these good things I do. Look at how I'm helping the world. Look at how I'm changing the landscape of consumer technology, right? And we think we're doing all this good, right? But that's not why you're loved. right? That's not why you're accepted, right? It's like a father loves his son because he's his son. He doesn't love his son because his son gets straight A's, right? But unfortunately, that's true for all Asian families. But if we're talking about, unconditional God or unconditional love, right? It just loves you for who you are, not for what you do. So I think for me, it was this huge realization, and it freed me to not be religious anymore. I think religion binds people. I think religion, in many ways, it doesn't. To me, religion ultimately doesn't help people. I actually think it holds people, and I think it's about, oh, what can I do? What good can I do to earn acceptance? Right?
Yeah.
How do I earn my way to heaven? How do I earn my way to Mecca? How do I earn my way to Allah? To whatever it is, nirvana, whatever it is. It's always about my effort or my work, which then becomes human pride, right? Which becomes, now I'm holier than thou versus just being human. And so anyway, so going back was, I've never actually told this story on a podcast. This is a crazy story. So I have 5 dreams, 5 nights in a row while I'm at this Christian rehab in Canada. And every night it's the same exact dream, but it's a different rap icon that wants to sign me as a gospel rap artist. Okay. So the first night was Dr. Dre, and he was like, it was Dr. Dre and Snoop. They're like, yo, we want to sign you to a gospel rap contract. The second night was Diddy. Okay. The third night I remember was Will Smith. The fourth night was Hammer. And the fifth night was Eminem. Okay. Now, when you have the same dream twice, you're going to be like, okay, that's weird.
Yeah.
Right? 3 times, you're like, what the fuck? Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then 4 or 5 times, now it's just getting stupid. Right. You're just like, okay, what's going on here? Right.
Yeah.
And so I went to my mentor and I was like, why do you think I'm having these dreams? And he was like, well, maybe God's telling you to get back into your first love, which is music. You want to be the 9th member of the Wu-Tang Clan, right? Like it was like, and he was like, I was like, is that okay? I thought, music, entertainment, and all that was like the devil, right? I shouldn't be touching that. He's like, well, maybe it's time. Maybe God's saying it's okay for you to go back. And I was like, so I said, what am I going to do? He's like, I don't know. Go make some music, right? So I leave the rehab. I go back to LA, and I meet with this worship leader from this Christian worship band and this Asian American church. His name was Mike Wang, and I still remember. And Mike had Cubase, and he had a laptop, and he had his guitar and his keyboard. He's like, "Yo, Jay," he's like, if you want to make beats, we can just make beats in my house, and we can just record to it on my Cubase. And so I was like, sure, why not? And it was like the time when like Linkin Park and like all these, like rock rap bands were like the shit, right? Like POD and like all that, right? So Limp Bizkit. And I was like, yo, let's make like Christian Linkin Park, right? No. So he would play his guitar and make his little beats, and then I would rap and he would sing. And it was like this little Christian hip hop duo. And I made this little album. So this is a crazy story. So I made this album, and I go to this other Christian monastery in Kansas City called IHOP, and it's not International House of Pancakes. It's called the International House of Prayer.
It's the other IHOP.
Okay. So I go to this place called IHOP, and it's literally like X-Men school. Like it exists today. It's still there today. I think it's been now like almost 20 years of nonstop 24-hour prayer and worship in the middle of Kansas City, Grandview, Missouri, right? And it's all young people, like hipsters, and they all just go in 2-hour increments, and they worship and they pray. And it's like this really spiritual zone. It's like this weird place, and there's all these people that are prophetic. They tell your future, they'll pray for you, and all these different things. So I go there, and if you watch the movie Matrix, right, there's this there's the Oracle, and then you see these kids, right, the spoon bending kid, and this kid and that kid, right. And so we're having this retreat there, and then this Oracle person, who's a man, brings out like 4 or 5 young kids, and they're all between the ages of like 7 and 12. And he's like, these young children are prophetic, and they're gonna prophesy over you. And I'm just looking at these kids, and I'm like, okay, right. This is gonna be fun, right? And this 7-year-old, 8-year-old kid, blonde kid, just looks at me and he goes, "You play music?" And I was like, talking to me? And then I remember my buddy was with me. He's like, yeah. He just made a rap album, right? And this kid goes, I have a word for you. This kid's like 8 years old, right?
Yeah.
So then the oracle person says, okay, this kid, whenever he gets a prophecy, it's in the form of pictures he draws. So he's going to go into the room and draw his picture with the crayons, and then come back out, and then he'll give you the word. And I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting. So this kid comes back out, and he takes out this 8x12 paper, and it's fully colored, and it's a silver sword with orange and red flames around it. And in the middle of the sword, he puts a musical note, like a black musical note.
Yeah.
And this little kid looks at me and says, God has given you a new ministry and a new calling. And his calling is music. And he says, every time you swing the sword, the words that come out of your mouth are going to cut open the hearts of a generation and turn them back to God. And I was like, I was like, what? And so I immediately called my buddy Mike. I was like, yo, I think we should upgrade to Pro Tools, man. I think we're about to go to the next level. So kid you not, what happened was, and I'll fast forward because I'm just going to we get to talk for like literally 6 hours here. I go back to LA, and my only friend from high school, her name was Kathy Nguyen, who's now a super famous actress in Vietnam. Okay. But she was an extra in the choir for my senior musical, Fiddler on the Roof. And I still remember, okay, whatever years back, she asked me, because I was like the first Asian American that was like a lead for a musical, right? In a high school play. She was like, Jason, and she was super shy at the time. She's like, do you think I should really, pursue Hollywood and try to be an actress? It's really hard being an Asian American. I remember telling her, I was like, Kathy, you only got one life to live, follow your passion and go for it. So now years later, I'm in LA, I'm fresh off the mission field. I have this little Christian Linkin Park CD in my hand. We're catching up over dinner, and she's the only person I know in Hollywood at this time. And she's just like, hey, this actually sounds pretty good, Jason. This is kind of cool. It's kind of dope. And I was like, yeah, thanks, man. She's like, I know my friend, he actually manages a bunch of Asian hip hop artists. I was like, Asian hip hop artists? I was like, who? She's like, like he has this band, they're called Far East Movement. And I was like, who's Far East Movement? She's like, they're like the Asian Beastie Boys. And I was like, never heard of them. And she was like, and he also, manages this rapper named Jin. Remember Jin? I was like, oh, Jin from 106 in Park? Like Jin the MC? Like Rough Rider Jin? I was like, what happened to him? I heard he got dropped. And she was like, yeah, things, didn't go so well. And then my friend manages him now. And I'm like, who's your friend? He's like, oh, he runs all the Asian nightclubs. And I was like, Asian nightclubs? I was like, which Asian nightclubs? She's like, well, they're called Climax Global Entertainment. They run Area, they run LAX. I'm like, yo, I came from that world. I know who these guys are. These guys are like watching 14K. Like these are Asian triad dudes, right? She was like, yeah, he used to do that, but not anymore. And I'm like, Kathy, why would he want my Christian rap CD? That makes zero sense. She's like, just give it to me and let me just hand it to him. You never know. And I was like, fine. So she takes my CD, and apparently she gives it to the manager dude. And literally like 3 months later, I get this text, and she's like, hey, remember that guy I told you about that managed all the Asian rappers? I was like, yeah. She's like, he wants to meet up with you for lunch today. And I was like, okay, sure. So where? She's like, CPK. So I go to downtown LA, it's California Pizza Kitchen. And so it's me, my friend Kathy, and his manager. And, he just looks like an Asian thug, right? Like he's got a tiger tattoo. He's got the glasses, like Ray-Bans on. He's just swagged out, just sitting there, and he's just like, so what do you do? And I was like, I'm a pastor. and he was like, I thought you're a rapper. And I was like, yeah, I'm trying to do that, but I've been on the mission field for like the last 5 years. And he was like, yo, hold up. Before we start this conversation, I just want to let you know one thing. He was like, I'm actually a PK. I'm a pastor's kid. He goes, my dad's a pastor, my grandfather's a pastor. He goes, but I hate organized Christianity. I think most Christians are hypocrites. I've been to most churches here in LA. I think it's all full of, whatever. And he was like, you know what? Don't just let you know, I'm good with God. Just don't try to convert me or anything. And yada, da, da, da. And I was just like, yo, I was like, first of all, I was like, I don't believe in religion. I believe in relationship. And I believe that Jesus said in the Bible, where 2 or 3 gather, he's there with them. So technically me, you, my friend Kathy here, talking about the big J upstairs, we're having church right now, California Pizza Kitchen. And then he was just like taken back. And then so I tell him my story and how I found my faith. And then, I have this weird prophetic gift too. So I started reading his mail and I was like, I think if you do this and do that, things will change and yada, yada. And he started getting teary-eyed. So he's like freaking out. And he's like, give me a second, right? He's like holding back the tears. So he goes to the restroom, comes back out rushing. And he's like, yo, and his alarm on his BlackBerry is going off, this BlackBerry time, right? And on the alarm, he says, look, and I look at his BlackBerry and it says 2 o'clock on the calendar and it says the word church. And it's like going off. And I'm like, why does it say church? He goes, that's what I'm saying. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I was supposed to look for a church location for Far East Movement's music video shoot this weekend, but they already found it. And that's why I was able to cancel, reschedule, and have lunch with you. But it's 2 o'clock right now. We're having church. And I was just like, oh, right. I was like, what? And so this crazy thing happens where over the next 72 hours, he introduces me to Kev Nish from Far East Movement. He introduces me to Jin. And I basically lead them all to faith in Christ. And I baptize them all at their manager's bathtub in 1234 Wilshire Boulevard, right on the edge of K-Town in downtown LA. And I was like, guys, I believe God has a plan and we're going to change East and Western music. And so long story short, fast forward, how I got into the industry was I ended up investing in the company. And that was my first investment in media entertainment. And part of the deal was we were going to build a digital platform for Asian artists on YouTube. So this is like 2008, right?
Yeah.
And at this time, I literally had a dream where I saw Jin and FM and everyone had like their own show, but it was on YouTube. And so I was like, we're going to build this platform. This is like 88 Rising before 88 Rising. And it was called Asian Digital Venture Network. It's called advn.tv. And so I invested in that. And I also invested in the management company that was managing Far East and Jin. And part of the deal was they were going to produce my album.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm in the studio and Kev, I still remember Kev's like, A&Ring me. And he's like, I remember one night we're in the office in the studio and he's just like, yo, Jay, we've been listening to your music and, we love your heart. We love what you're doing, your faith, but like, your rap's like, okay, it's not great. And I'm just like, oh man, damn, right? He's like, and you're not like, you're not like Jay-Z, you're not like Eminem, you're not black, you're not white, he's like, we're not really sure what direction to go with you. And I was like, so what are we gonna do? And then Kev was like, yo, I got this crazy idea. And I was like, what? He's like, when you pray for us, it's really powerful, man, your voice and you talk and you pray. He's like, do you have any of your prayers or your sermons online? I was like, you mean like my sermons? Like, I was like, yeah, I got a ton on YouTube. He's like, take that beat your friend sent you, because a friend had sent me a beat that he believed God had given, this hip hop beat. And he was like, gave it to me the night before. He's like, play that, find one of your sermons on YouTube and just play it over the beat and just see what happens. And I was just like, all right. So I play this hip hop beat and it's just going. And then I play a sermon over the beat and it just lands in this crazy cadence. Like it sounds and feels like Eminem, but it's not. And then he goes, holy, he's like, Jason, this is crazy. I was like, what? He's like, yo, man, look, my hair's standing up. And I was like, what? He's like, you're like Eminem and Joel Osteen, like smashed into one, right? And I'm just like, what are you talking about? He's like, can you just like talk over the music? I was like, you mean like speak, like talk, like preach? He's like, yeah, just preach over the beat. I was like, of course I can. He was like, yo, can you just talk about anything? I was like, whatever you want me to. He's like, we're going to the studio tomorrow night. So we go into the studio. He loads the track, and then he's just like, just preach about love, preach about love, preach about love. And I was like, all right. So I laced 3 verses in one take.
Yeah.
And it's just preaching over the beat, right? So I'm not rapping, I'm preaching. It's like spoken word. It's like spoken word. And he freaks out. He's like, yo, this is so crazy. He's like, this sounds like Eminem. And he was like, you know what? We need to get someone to sing on the hook that'll make it pop and make it like radio friendly. And I was like, who are you gonna get? And he's like, we got this one friend that sounds like Michael Jackson. He needs the money. He's really dope. I was like, what's his name? He goes, his name's Bruno Mars. And I go, who's Bruno Mars? He goes, check out his MySpace. So he goes MySpace. And we're like, damn, he sounds like Michael Jackson. I was like, how much? He's like, you like him? He's like, let me give him a call. So he calls up Bruno and he comes back to me. He's like, Jason, I got a sweet deal. I was like, what? He's like, he needs the money. You know, it's almost Christmas. He needs to buy gifts and all that. So he's going to do 4 tracks for you for $1,500. He'll write it and he'll record it and sing it. And I was like, $1,500? I was like, done. So I literally write the check, Bruno Mars, $1,500 I still have the check stub, right? And over the next whatever week, he records me 4 tracks, right? And now I have my first single, which is called Love, of me preaching over 16 bars with Bruno Mars on the hook. I mean, literally John 3:16 with Bruno Mars, right? So we released the song, and it immediately gets like, seriously, like hundreds of thousands and millions of views. And then it hits like top 10 Amazon Christian singles chart, right? And I'm just like, what is going on, right? and it just takes off. And then of course, like months later, FM records like a G6, right? In the basement of the Cataracts. And then they sign an Interscope and Cherry Tree, and then boom, and 15 million records sold. And of course, Bruno, months later, gets signed to Atlantic, and his career goes out, obviously out of the stratosphere. And then we sent Jin on a one-way ticket to Hong Kong. Didn't even know if what would happen to him. Like, he was literally performing in front of drunk men in Malaysia just to make money.
Yeah.
And he had a one-way ticket, one Cantonese rap album called ABC, and it blew up. And as you know now, I always say Jin has 9 lives. He's like one of the biggest celebrities and rappers in China today. And he's just crushing it, right? And so that was the foray into the music industry.
That's amazing. That's an amazing story. And so how did you end up pursuing I mean, you obviously didn't, right? You pivoted to like be a music executive and entertainment executive, but like, did you ever think seriously, like, I'm just going to continue going down the rabbit hole of music, and like myself, as an artist?
I think during that specific time, I was really exploring it, and I got pretty serious. So I ended up recording a full album, and then and to be real with you, I started experiencing Hollywood, and then now it's like, now I'm in Hollywood, and there's fast cars and fast girls, and there's money, and there's power, and there's influence, and all this stuff. And to be real with you, I started losing my Jesus. Right. And I just got caught up in it. Right. And long story short was, I ended up, kind of falling away from my faith, and really started getting, really deeply involved in the entertainment game. And through that, I made a lot of mistakes, and I ended up having a fallout, and I ended up checking myself back into rehab again. and this time was for drinking, right? And just, I just really, got lost in that side of performance. Like, that performance, bug was still not out of me, right? And I now wanted more influence in music and entertainment and media and Hollywood and all these different things that it comes with on a silver platter. And it wasn't till, my mother got cancer, stage 4, and by the grace of God, I took a year off to go take care of her, and by the grace of God, she came out of it miraculously, which is a whole nother story.
My God.
And she's now 7 years, cancer free. But I think that moment of humbling, when I had to face my mom and my dad that I had not seen in years, I think that really brought me back to my foundation, and realizing that, whether you're working for the church or whether you're working for Hollywood, it's the same trap, right?
Yeah.
Which is, who do you know? what do you have? You know what I'm saying? And what can you do?
Right.
And it finally made me realize after that, I don't want to go back unless I really believe this is something that I'm called to. And so a series of other crazy things happened for me to get back into the music and entertainment and media game, which is a whole nother crazy story. But long story short was, at the time we had split. So FM had split to another company. And then I had left that manager and split on my own. And then I went to go back to take care of my mom. And at that time, there was like a lot of drama and noise in the community and whatnot. And so I just kind of was like, I'm just done with it. I don't want to deal with it. And I'll just tell you another crazy story because I just feel like the Justin Khan podcast is making me want to talk about all these crazy spiritual experiences.
Dude, this is my favorite episode. I gotta say it. This is my favorite conversation that I've had. It is wild. So tell me the story.
Okay, so this is where it gets wild. So at this point, I had lost a lot of friends. Like I said, I'd fallen from grace. I had just done things that I just wasn't happy for. I was basically saying I was living this Christian pastor life, but I was living this Hollywood lifestyle. And the two were it's like a double life, right? And so I was like, you know what? I don't want. I just confessed and I came clean. I was like, I don't want to deal with any of that. A lot of people were hurt, and I was just like, just trying to find myself. And so at that time, I didn't have a lot of friends, and I was back in LA, and my mom had just started recovering from cancer. And no, she was at that time. No, this story happens before I find out my mom has cancer. So this is what happened. So at that time, I was broken. I was like at the bottom, and I was just like literally just in this dark cloud. And I one day get a phone call from my friend. His name's Sunu Ganera. He's a South African. He's a black man director, incredibly talented. Directed a movie called Pride. And so he calls me and said, Jason, I just feel like we should have a prayer meeting today. And I was like, sure, I ain't doing nothing. Right. So he lives in Santa Monica. So I called my friend Nicole Wilkerson, and she's a film financer. She's also African-American. And at this time, I really kind of only had black friends because a lot of my Asian friends that kind of shunned me. They're just like, oh, Jason's like, he's fallen pastor from grace. Right. So it was just like, all that. But what happened at that time was I was talking to Nicole. And I was like, you should just come to this prayer meeting with me. She was like, sure, I'll join. She's like, can I bring a friend? And she's like, I was like, sure. She's like, yeah, she's a prophet. I was like, all right, sure. So her name is Danita. I never met her. And so Danita was working for Disney, right? But she apparently was this prophetic woman, right? So we go, and she's African-American. So it's three black Hollywood executives and this Asian-American Chinese dude, right? Yeah. And we're just having a prayer meeting in Santa Monica. And we're just praying, and we're praying. And all of a sudden, we're getting into the spirit, right? And I still remember it was January 22nd, 2012. And all of a sudden we feel the like electricity in the room, and the spirit of God, like angels were in the room. And then Danita looks at me and she goes, Jason, the Lord's given me a word. And I'm like, and then I just knock onto my back, and she goes, you are going to New York very soon. And this trip to New York is going to change the entire trajectory of your life and mission. And as she says this to me, I have like an open vision, and I hear a voice say, January 22nd is a true new year, not January 1st. And January 22nd was the first day of Chinese New Year, 2012, year of the dragon. And then I see this dragon like cross me over, and then I see this lion like eat the dragon. And then all of a sudden I see a picture of Bruce Lee in front of me. And I see Bruce Lee saying to me, I know this sounds all crazy, but he says to me, it sounds like an ayahuasca trip, right? This is an ayahuasca trip. So Bruce Lee says to me, just as I brought Asians from the West to the East, I'm now going to bring Asians from the East back to the West for my glory, like Bruce Lee. And he goes like this. And then he takes a bite of a banana. And then he takes a bite of a banana, and then he goes like this, and he says, get ready. And I'm like, and I wake up, and I'm just like, yo, what? Right? So I go to Danita. I go, Danita, do you know that I'm going to JFK in the morning? I have a flight in the morning to New York. right? And she was like, I had no idea. And I'm like, this is crazy, right? So I was going to New York for a meeting with Sony Music to talk about my next gospel album. Okay. Now, right before, so I get to New York and then I'm on G Chat, I remember. And then my best buddy in the world, his name is Phil Chen. And he, his family started the company HTC Corporation, which is the first Android, smartphone. And he was running all their investments and all their content and whatnot. And so we're just chatting. He was like, "Yo, Jay, where you at?" I was like, "Oh, I'm in New York." So, "Oh, I'm coming to New York in a few days." I was like, "Cool, I'll be here for like a few weeks." He's like, "Oh, cool." He's like, "Why don't we get dinner on the 30th?" And I was like, "Yeah, we can get dinner on 30th." I was like, "Oh, but," I was like, "Actually, I'm having dinner that night with my buddy Jeremy Lin." And he's like, "Oh, doesn't he play for the Knicks?" I was like, "Jeremy Lin?" I was like, "Yeah, man." But I was like, "Dude, pray for him, man." I was like, "I think he's, I think he's gonna get cut, really soon. I think they might drop him. He might get sent to Italy or not have a position." And he was like, "Yo," he goes, "I know Allen Houston, the assistant general manager of the Knicks. He's a good friend of mine, and he's a hardcore Christian. Why don't I tell Allen to come join the dinner and try to convince him to keep Jeremy on the Knicks on behalf of Jesus Christ," right? and so we're like, I was like, "Yo, that sounds like a plan. Let's try to help out our boy Jeremy," right? So fast forward, I think it was the 29th. I forgot the exact date. So it was 29th or 30th, but it was a Sunday and a Monday. Monday we're having dinner, and it was a Sunday. So Sunday before the dinner with Jeremy, I go to Redeemer Presbyterian. It's a very famous church, a pastor named Tim Keller. I go there on my own, and I bump into Phil and Jeremy in the lobby after service, unplanned. So I'm like, "Oh shoot!" I was like, "Phil, Jeremy, Phil, we're gonna have dinner tomorrow night. Yo, like, let's all connect." And then it was like, "Oh, cool." So then hours go by, and then I go to this other church service called Hillsong, which is like this hipster church, right? It's been in the news recently, and all that. And so I go to that service, and then I bump into Phil again, and Phil's sitting in the same section, but we both didn't plan to go to the second service. I'm like, "Yo, that's crazy." I was like, we saw each other again, right? So I was like, cool, whatever. We'll see you tomorrow. So then another like hours go by, and me and my buddy want to go watch this Chinese Hollywood film called Flowers of War with Christian Bale, directed by Zhang Yimou, right? And we're like, "Let's go stop at Shake Shack in Times Square before we go to the theater." So we go to Shake Shack, walk into Shake Shack, and my boy Phil is there again.
Stalking
me. Third time in the middle of Manhattan, but this time he's with his whole HTC team, right? And we're laughing. We're like, "Yo, what's the chances we bump into each other 3 times on a Sunday in New York?" And so one of his executives asked me, he's like, "So what do you do?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm in Asian music and digital media and content. I'm trying to build this digital platform, but things kind of didn't go so well, and I'm kind of just back at square one." And he was like, "Oh," he's like, you know what we're doing with HTC." And at that time, they're trying to launch their own Netflix on HTC. He's like, "We're going to be doing rich content." And he was showing me Moneyball, and he was showing me how it was actually being viewed on the smartphone device. And he's like, "You ever thought about talking to Phil and his aunt, Cher, the founder, Cher Wang, who's a very close friend of mine, about starting your own Asian digital channel on HTC phones?" And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about something like that." And then Hammer's like, Phil was like, "Let's just talk about it after our dinner with Jeremy tomorrow night." And I was like, "Cool, man, I'm down." So I go watch the movie. Next night, we're having dinner. We're in Chinatown. It's Jeremy. Allen Houston doesn't show up because he doesn't care. My buddy Phil brings 2 of his white buddies there, and they're like, "You're on the Knicks?" Like, they didn't even know he was even on the team, right? And this is like wide-eyed Jeremy. He's like, his second year in the NBA or whatever, and he's just like pure, he's like the best dude in the world. And he was just like, "Yo, Jay," he's like, "Guys, I got my first game at MSG tomorrow night, Madison Square Garden. I'm super nervous. They're either playing the Pistons or the Celtics. I don't fully remember, but he was like, I'm having my first game, and I'm really nervous. And honestly, I don't even know if I'm going to get any playing time. But they might give me some trash minutes. But if you guys come and support me, and come, I'll get you guys tickets." So we're like, "Yeah, dude, we're there for you. We'll come." So he goes off for practice, and then me and Phil in our heads were like, "Oh man, it's over, right?" Like, so after the dinner, me and Phil go back to his hotel, and he's like, "Let's talk about this Asian digital, music channel thing or content channel thing, platform that you've been talking about." I was like, yeah. So I was like, I've been wanting to do it. I tried it, with my last company, but it failed, and it didn't go so well. And I'm now coming back at square one. But I was meditating this morning, and I had a vision, and I saw the whole thing unfold before my eyes. And he was like, talk to me. What was it? I was like, well, I just saw it in different levels. I was like, he's like, what do you mean? Like Asian media? And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, well, level one, I saw Asian pop music go global. And I said, and I used the specific word, I said like a phenomenon. It was like everyone was listening to Asian pop music. It was like, I don't know how to explain it. It was just everywhere. And he was like, Asian pop music? He's like, what, like K-pop? Like, I was like, this is like 2012, right? So mind you, this was literally about 1 year before Gangnam Style hits.
Yeah.
Okay. So then I go level two. I was like, I just saw Asian content taking over social media. And I was like, and again, this is 2012. So this is really before Asian YouTube channels started going out with content, and Weibo and WeChat in China and Kakao and all these different things. I was like, it's taking over social media. I said level three, it's like I saw Asian premium content, like Entourage, like Game of Thrones level. This is before Game of Thrones, but I remember saying like Entourage. It was like premium Asian content in film and television. Like it was everywhere. And again, of course, this was years before Fresh Off the Boat, and you know what I'm saying, and Crazy Rich Asians and everything, and Parasite and all this, whatever. But then I said level four. I said, it's like I heard Asian news 24/7, but it was like in Mandarin and English. But I was like, the only thing I could describe was like an Asian Al Jazeera. I was like, it was like this global network, and it was like social, and it was interactive, and it was just taking over the planet. And I was just like, and then from there, I just saw Asian media and Asian TV, right, going all over the world. And he said to me, Jason, I don't think this is that crazy. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, our HTC, our family, we just acquired TVB, which was the biggest television network in Hong Kong. And he's like, it's mainly cable, but we want to make it go digital because, we're a smartphone platform. And he said, our biggest markets are US and China. We're 100 million handsets worldwide at the time. And so he's like, and technologically, there's not much more we can do with the smartphone. He's like, what we need is more content, original content. And that's what's going to keep the clientele. So he was like, mate, why don't we go back to my aunt, Cher Wang, and let's talk to her about this vision. And we should start a Asian digital media platform on HTC phones, right? And I was like, yo, you serious? And he's like, yo, I'm dead serious. I think, he goes, the talent, the content. He goes, we got the platform. Like, let's make this happen. And I'll talk to our aunt, let's pitch it to her, and if she'll invest. So I was like, yo, man, I've been through a lot already. This Hollywood thing is crazy. And I was just like, you know what? I just really hope this isn't a good idea. I really want to pray that this is a God idea. And he was like, so he's like, okay. I was like, let's just pray about this and ask God for a sign. And so he was like, all right. So we're like, it's like 2 a.m. and we're just like, God, if you really want us to do this Asian media, TV, content, digital, whatever idea platform, like, give us a sign, like, give us confirmation. Like, this is a big idea. This is gonna be the next 10 years of our lives, right? So we say amen, and the sign comes. So he gets a text message from his wife. And in this text message, she's sending him a picture of her and his baby son, Miles, saying hi from Hong Kong in the mall. And behind her, there's these big words that says Asian TV behind her, right? And let me hold on. Let me find you this picture. I think I have it in my email somewhere.
All right.
I'll pull it up. And so he looks at this picture and he goes, Jason, I think God just gave us a sign. And I was like that, and it shows me the picture. I'm like, Asian TV. I was like, why does it say Asian TV? And then he was like, I don't know. I was like, just call her up right now. so he calls her up. He goes, hey, he's like, babe, where are you? She's like, oh, I'm at the IFC mall in Hong Kong. And he's like, what's that store behind you? She goes, oh, it's not a store. I'm in the food court. It's a restaurant called Asian Twist. But whoever took the picture cropped it so that it says Asian TV.
That's amazing.
Isn't that crazy? So right when he said this, goosebumps all over us. We're freaking out. We're like, oh, and we're like, yo, this is crazy. This is a sign, right? So
Yeah.
I always say, when God gives you a sign in the spiritual, he'll confirm it in the physical. And so what happened was, the next day we go to the Knicks game, right? And so they don't even give us good seats. They give us like second level seats. Jeremy gives us like second level seats. We're sitting up in the second upper deck. I'm sitting next to Jeremy's mom and dad, Auntie Shirley and Uncle Lin.
Yeah.
Phil's on my right side, and it's like the last 5 minutes of the game, they put Jeremy in. And all of a sudden, dude, in 5 minutes, Jeremy scores 4 points, 4 assists, 1 rebound, 1 steal. And you feel electricity go through Madison Square Garden. Like, you could feel people just like, put the Chinese kid back in, put that fucking kid back in from Yale. They're like, he's not from Yale, he's from fucking Harvard. And like, people are like, you know, yelling, like, you know, New York style, right? I'm just like, I'm looking around and I'm looking at Phil, I'm like, you feeling what I'm feeling? He's like, yeah. I'm like, this is an Asian American moment. And he was like, and I literally look at Auntie Shirley and I said, Auntie Shirley, you might think I'm crazy right now, but I feel like God wants me to tell you that your son's going to be a starter for the New York Knicks really soon, starting 5. He's going to have multiple 30-point games, and God's going to use him to be a light to New York City and the whole world for Jesus Christ. And she looked at me, she was like, is that a prophecy? And I was like, maybe. And she's like, just pray he doesn't get sent to Italy and lose his job. Like, super Taiwanese mom, right? Like she said something to that effect to me, right? So we go down into the locker room, we go down into the green room, and there's a very famous Chinese basketball player named Blackie and his wife, Fan, Christine Fan. She's a famous singer. And I just met them, but they were also friends of Jeremy. And he always records everything. He had a camcorder with him at all times. Like, he just records like Instagram Live all the time, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like Carmelo comes into the green room, and you know, you know, all the other players, and nothing matters. Like, I can't see anything. All I see is Jeremy walks into the locker room, and he's just like glowing. Like, he's glowing. He's like, he's like a young David in the back of the field that killed a lion and the bear, and he just took off the head of Goliath, right? And you just knew something was special about Jeremy. Like, it was just something, there was something that was not, it was out of this world. It was spiritual. And so we huddle, and we grab a huddle, and we pray together. And I just pray a blessing over Jeremy, that God would use him, you know, to be an example to the world, right? For Christ and for the culture. And this dude Blackie recorded the prayer, so you can actually go to YouTube right now, and you can actually still watch this video of us praying. And the next game, Linsanity breaks out.
Yeah.
So I'm back in LA, and I'm watching it on an iPad, and that's not even it was just like, you know, moving sticks. I'm just listening to the radio, and I remember I was at Soul Garden, this Korean barbecue place in K-Town, and it's just like Jeremy Lin scores 10 points, 15 points, 20 points, 24. Like, I was just like, what is going on? And then, like, it just happens, right? And of course, the Cinderella story happens. Linsanity, he's on the front page of Time magazine. But to me, what was so my point with all of that was, I then called up Phil, and I was like, whatever happened that weekend in New York is a sign that we absolutely have to start this company, this platform. And it shows you what happens when one Asian talent breaks on a global international stage in a digital era. It changes the world. Like, literally, Jeremy did more for the gospel of Christ in China than Billy Graham has tried for 50 years. Like, everyone in 72 hours knew who Jeremy Lin was, that he loved Jesus, who his grandmother was, what village he came from. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was all just, you know, it was madness of influencer economy, right? Like, what happens with digital influence. And so at that time, I was like, yo, we got to start this company. And so we ended up starting East West Artists, which is now East West Ventures, which is my fund, which was focusing on bridging East and West through media, entertainment, and technology through stories and talent. And the whole idea was that we were going to represent Asian talent from Asia into Hollywood talent into Asia. We would build it on a digital platform, and we would invest into content that would bridge that gap. And it was through that experience that I ended up starting 88rising. And so that was where that happened, and that was a whole nother story, and then on and on and on and on. So anyways, I never told this story on a podcast. It's a really crazy thing if you look back at it. And I guarantee you, I really believe Jeremy's going to be back in the NBA very, very soon. And Linsanity is not over.
That's amazing. I mean, it was you're right. It was such a watershed moment for Asian Americans. Like they wanted something to root for, and seeing like when Linsanity happened, it was like everybody became every Asian person I knew became an NBA fan. Everybody was watching Knicks games. Yeah. So, okay. I mean, this has been I love this conversation. It's been like 2 hours we've been at it.
Oh, wow. Crazy.
Yeah. Tell me, I mean, I do want to talk about 88rising a little bit and tell me like, how that happened. And then also, I'm particularly interested in like, what you think is going to happen, like what you thought was going to happen with Asian culture then, and like, has it played out how you thought it would happen, and like what the future is going to look like there,
No, great question. So what happened was I saw that the China market was exploding in consumer consumption, and the entertainment media market was beginning to open up in 2012. So that's why we started East-West Ventures. And at that time, we knew that in 5 years, China's box office would be bigger than Hollywood. And so we knew that Hollywood was going to go east, and that was where the future was at. And so we wanted to capture that opportunity and that arbitrage. And so we ended up doing over $1 billion in transactions, and we ended up, advising on the acquisition of Dark Horse Comics. We brought Lee home, one of the biggest superstars in China, and put him at CAA and put him in the movie Black Hat. And we started bringing Korean talent, Japanese talent, and YouTube was now really starting to blow up, and Vine, and then Snap, and all these different things were happening. But what happened was around 2014, a lot of digital media brands started exploding. So you started seeing multi-channel networks like Maker Studio, Twitch, Fullscreen, Machinima, and then you're starting digital brands like Vice, Vox, right, BuzzFeed, Tastemade. And so all these things were happening on YouTube, and YouTube was pouring hundreds of millions of dollars, right, into content at that time. And then I was introduced through a friend named Tony Chen. He had an ad tech company called Channel Factory, and he's like, you should meet a good friend of mine that invests in digital media companies. His name's Alan Debevois, and he has a fund called Third Wave Ventures. And so I met with Alan, and he had just invested. He was a founder of Machinima.
Yeah, one of the founders.
Exactly, one of the founders, and he had invested in All Def Digital, which was an African American, and multi-channel network. Then he had invested into MITU, which is a Latin American multi-channel network on YouTube. So I looked at him. I was like, "What about Asia?" He was like, "What about Asia?" He was like, "You put together a plan and a team, and I'll write the first check." And I was like, "Just give me a few weeks," right? So I went back and I basically started talking to different people. And it's like, hey, I want to build this digital media channel for Asian content and Asian content creators, but it's going to be for Asia by Asians, to the rest of the world. And we're going to do it on YouTube. We're going to do it on Snap. We're going to do it on IG. We're going to do it on Facebook. And so a friend of mine, Justin Chan, who was actually at the time I was managing Justin, who's now a very famous director. So he directed Miss Purple and Gook and all that. And Justin was, the Asian guy in Twilight. And so Justin was just like, Justin's just one of the best dudes in the world. He's like, yo, Jay, you should meet with my boy, Sean. I was like, who's Sean? He was like, yo, he's perfect. He like works at Vice, because you want to do like an Asian Vice. He works at Vice. And he was like, if you meet him and you guys do something together, you guys could blow it up, because he knows the playbook. And I was like, all right, cool. So he set it up. So we were in Cafe Blue. I still remember, K-Town, LA. And it's Justin, Sean Miyashiro in a cowboy hat and and a glass of wine, and I'm sitting there, and I was like, I was looking at the guy, like, this guy's this feels so wrong, and then he just starts telling me, what he wants to do and what he wants to do with his learnings from Vice, and I was like telling him like, yo, this is what I want to do, and I want to create like the Vice for Asia, and he was like, let's keep talking about it. And so, we talked about it for another week and just got to know each other more. And I was like, look, why don't you leave Vice? And I got a term sheet ready to sign. Literally, I actually had a term sheet, right, from Alan. And I was like, you can come and we can co-found this, and you be the CEO and be the front face. I'll be the chairman. I'll be behind the scenes. I'll raise the capital. I'll do the business partnerships. I'll do all that. But you take the playbook that you had at Vice and you just execute it here, right? And so that's what happened. So I ended up
putting together the plan with Sean. Alan wrote the first check. I called up Steve Chen, actually emailed Steve Chen, co-founder of YouTube, and he wrote the second check. He just literally looked at the plan. It was 2 emails, and I was like, you need to get on a call. He's like, no, I'll just like just super Batman style, right? And then I was introduced to Spark Lab. Well, I knew Spark Labs out of Seoul, Korea, like the Y-Combinator at Seoul. And so Bernard Moon, he was the third check. And then he introduced me to GDP, which is Martin Hartono, the biggest digital media group out of Indonesia. And then my uncle's very good friend, Francis Learn, who was a former chairman of CVC Capital and one of the biggest buyout platforms on the planet, and Li Ka-shing's banker, Francis Learn. And so basically, I wanted strategic investors in our Series A. So we raised 2.5 million. And I wanted Silicon Valley, which was Steve, Silicon Beach, which was Alan Debevoise. I wanted Greater China, which was Francis Learn / Li Ka-shing. And then I wanted South Korea, obviously, and Southeast Asia. So I wanted strategically to have resources from our first round to represent all of Asia, not just Asian America, but a celebration of Asian culture from Asia to the rest of the world. And so, and then it happened again. It just like providence or luck, right? And next thing you know, Dumbfounded, we all know Dumbfounded, the greatest rapper from K-Town ever, sends, Sean a link, right, to this Korean trap rapper named Keith Ape. And he's like, yo, and Sean's playing it for me. He's like, yo, this is the hardest shit I've ever heard. And it's Jaeson Ma from Keith Ape. And it was like completely antithetical to K-pop. You know what I'm saying? Like it was grimy, it was ghetto, it was shot for probably $100 on an iPhone, and you got these dope ass Korean and Japanese rappers spitting fire on this trap track, right? And it's just so hard. And we're just like, yo, this is the hardest Asian rap we've ever heard in our lives, right? So we sign them, and then we do the remix, right? And Sean and then put on Waka Flocka, ASAP Ferg, Father, Dumbfounded on the track. We drop it on Complex, and it's like the first thing that hits, right? And it just, next thing you know, we're in New York, LA, and it's like crowds surfing to Jaeson Ma, white kids and black kids chanting in Korean. It was just the craziest thing. And it was like this whole movement. And then it was like months later, I remember I was in New York, and I was in the office with Sean, and Dumbfounded had then sent us the first video link to Rich Chiga, or Rich Brian now, Dat Stick. And so up until that point, we knew of Rich because he was popular on Vine. Like he was just like this little meme, comedian. But then he makes this Dat Stick track, and it's going viral on YouTube and Facebook. And we're listening to it. I'm like, yo, is this a joke? Is this Asian Slim Jesus? Right? And then Sean's just like, no, listen to him spit though. Listen to his voice, it's so deep. And he's like, yo, this kid, he's got talent. And so the idea was, let's do the same thing we did with Keith with Rich. So reach out to Rich, and of course, 88, we had this genius franchise called Rappers React, where, at South by Southwest, we paid all these young up and coming rappers who are now the biggest rappers now, but back then they were just starting. This is 2015, 16. So it was like 21 Savage, Lil Yachty, Denzel Curry, Migos, and they all reacted to the Dat Stick video, right?
Yeah.
And we caught there. You remember that video. It's still the funniest. I still think it's the funniest reaction video in history. I still watch it 1,000 times and never stop laughing. But Ghostface Killer's on it, Cameron's on it, and of course at the end of the video, it gets picked up by CNN. And next thing you know, Ghostface is like, "Yo, I'll get on the remix," and we couldn't believe our ears. Like, for real? And then Sean's like, "No, he's for real." And I was like, "Are we really gonna do this?" And so we literally put it together, shoot the remix video in Tokyo. First time Rich travels out the country. And then, green screen Ghostface in, and we do the Dat Stick remix, drop it on YouTube. And I think that was like one of our first few official 88 Rising videos, and it broke the internet. It just becomes #1 trending video on YouTube, breaks the internet, people are freaking out. And, that's when from there was just no turning back. And then we found the Higher Brothers in Chengdu through, our in-house project manager, Allison. She was a DJ. She found, Higher Brothers on YouTube. There were like less than 1,000 views. And I was like, yo, this is the hardest Chinese rap I've ever heard. And of course, Filthy Frank, Joji then switches over and becomes Joji, and then everything just happens, and then it became what it became. And now, it's what's crazy about 88 Rising was, Series A, we brought in WPP to lead. And it's a funny story, right? Is that what I didn't say was when I was going around my first seed round of investors, and in Series A, I was like, we're Asian Vice, right? And because they didn't know like Asian digital media what channel, like what are you talking about? There's no comparison, there's no parallel, right? So I was like, have you ever heard of Vice? And they're like, these VCs are like, yeah, we've heard of Vice. I was like, have you checked the latest valuation? They're like, oh wow, 5.5 billion. I was like, well, we're the Asian Vice, we're called Rice. And they were like, where do we sign the check, right? So I literally, the original 88 Rising business deck was RYCE. It was called Rice, right? And
someone sent it to me. I remember seeing that.
I probably sent it to you. Yep. I remember, actually, we pitched you. We pitched you, and we pitched, you have a friend that was it starts with R. His name is R, and Sean knew him.
Rob.
Not Rob. Huh?
Was it Rob from Beatport? Who now runs Beatport? No,
not Rocco. I'll find the name, but I still remember we pitched you. We pitched someone else. It was at the time the deck was Rice, and of course we were never going to call it that, but it was like for VCs to understand the model. And so Series A, we met with WPP. I remember Alan Debevoise introduced us to WPP, and I remember telling Lance, who was running all their investments, like, dude, Vice is great for North America, but Vice is not working the same way it works in North America and Asia. And I said, and there needs to be a real authentic model where it's by Asians from Asia for Asians to the rest of the world, and us telling our stories. And so I said, we are the model that you need to invest in for Asia. So that's how I got WPP to lead our Series A. And then by the favor of God, Scott Spirit, who was at that time the chief digital officer at WPP, introduced me to Joe Tsai, a co-founder of Alibaba and owner of Brooklyn Nets. So then this is a really crazy story how I got Joe to invest. And I've actually never told this VC story. So basically, WPP was leading our Series A. I then brought in Horizon Ventures through Phil Chen, who was at Horizons at that time, which is Li Ka-shing's fund with Selena Chow. And then I ended up bringing in Silas Chow, who's, he funded and basically started, he's a fashion guru, right? So Tommy Hilfiger, Michael Kors, all that. So and then Sumitomo. But what happened was we had barely closed the Series A. We had almost gone bankrupt at that time, like through different convertible notes. Like it was just complete mess, right?
Yeah.
And me and Sean were funding the company out of our own pockets, right? And long story short was we had an investor that had a pro rata of about $1 million, but I had a gut feeling that he was not gonna have the money for it, right? And so when the WPP announcement came, I sent it to Joe on text on Ding Talk, and I was just like, "Yo, just want to let you know, WPP invested," and he was like, "Oh man," he was like, "Why didn't you tell me about this? I want to invest," and I was like, "Joe Tsai wants to invest in 88 Rising, right?" And I was like, "You serious?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Send me the info, man. I want to invest. I love what you guys are doing." And I was like, "But we're out of allocation." Right? So I have to reject Joe Tsai, right? And I'm just like, we're out of allocation. He's like, "Oh man." He's like, "Man, I really love what you guys are doing, but maybe next time, just let me know," right? And I was just like, "Wait," I said, "There's a chance in about 30 days that this pro rata may open up because I don't think this investor is going to come through." So he was like, "All right, just let me know in 30 days if the pro rata still goes away and I can invest." So 30 days passed, and just to my prediction, the investor doesn't come through. So I text Joe, and it's like the most gangster VC investment I've ever experienced as a founder. I was like, "Hey Joe, so just want to let you know that the $1 million allocation opened up, and you can invest." And he was like, "Oh, awesome." He's like, "Just send me an email, CC my lawyer, and just FYI, I can make a quick decision." Like sign Bruce Wayne, right?
Yeah.
Like sign Batman, right? So I'm like, okay. So I email him with the Dropbox links to the data room, term sheet, CC his lawyer. I wake up in the morning and the lawyer just goes, "All right, cool. We'll just get it done today." And then I'm just like, You didn't even click on the Dropbox link. You didn't even look into the data room, right? And so I was like, holy. And then of course, like I think like a day or two later, I'm getting these phone calls from his family office called Blue Pool Capital, and he's got him Ollie, he's got him Danny, he's got him Alex and Chris, and then they're all hitting me up like, yo, we heard our boss is investing in 88, and we've been listening to Rich Brian and Higher Brothers in the office in Hong Kong. We're loving this shit. It's fucking dope. And they're like, yo, can we put in a little money too? Can we invest? And then I was just like, I gave all the allocation to your boss. I'm like, fuck. They're like, damn, man, we really want to invest, right? So then I get another text message from Joe, and he's like, hey, so, I was talking to some of the guys in the office, and they just they all really want to invest in 88, and I feel bad for them. So do you think you can just give them like half my allocation? I'm like, dude, whatever you want, man, you're God.
Yeah.
So what happened was ended up, demigod. And so what happened was, everyone in the Blue Pool family ended up putting in checks. And then of course they introduced us to ByteDance, which then ByteDance came in the round after that. And then GDP, my Indonesian investor, really became our largest investor now. Jimmy Iovine came in and invested, and now, a bunch of other strategics. And then what I want to say about 88, which is crazy, is that now the company is, a multi-$100 million, digital music channel and label. And the craziest thing about it now is I've literally gotten dozens of submissions of all kinds of music labels, independent music labels, that are like, yo, we're the 88 Rising of the Middle East. We're the 88 Rising of reggaeton. We're the 88 Rising of Afro beats. We're the 88 Rising of South Indian hip hop. You know what I'm saying? We're the 88 Rising of tween girls on TikTok. Like, it's just crazy now that we created a model of do it yourself, which is we're going to sign our own artists. We're going to raise our own venture capital. We're going to build our own original content, and we're going to distribute it directly ourselves. And we're going to make no apologies, and we're going to make no answers to Universal, Sony, or Warner. Yeah. And so what has happened now, what's been amazing is that, the original vision of making like an Asian Vice is now pivoted to just becoming an Asian music label and digital channel and festival and all this. But that was what I believe it was supposed to become. And that was always Sean's passion and mission, which, I think he wants to be like, like an Asian Jimmy Iovine. And that's like his passion is like Asian P. Diddy, right? So, but, I think where 88 is now is where it's supposed to be. But what's encouraging about it is like whether I'm in Dubai or whether I'm in Jakarta or whether I'm in Mumbai, like kids will hit me up and just be like, yo, you inspired us to do the same, right? And it's very encouraging in that sense. So I'm very, very, very proud of that.
Dude, I love that. It's such an amazing story. Okay, so last question, and I'll let you go. Like today, you've gone through this whole, you had this, your entire life, it was like you went through the gang banger phase, selling drugs, to the working for MC Hammer, to the the missionary performing exorcisms, and then music industry executive, entertainment industry executive, Hollywood executive. We didn't even get into all the other things you've done in Hollywood. We're gonna have to have a part 2 of this conversation at some point. Okay. But like how are you, working in your Christian values into like the business world? Like, are you able to kind of sync those together?
It's a great question. I think, I think I heard Jack Ma once say, in your 20s, work under a mentor that you can learn all that you can from, and spend your time learning, making mistakes, learning, be a sponge. In your 30s, do it yourself, right? And learn how to make it happen, right? And hustle and build your own, your own path. I think he said in your 40s, do what you're good at, right? And I think in your 50s, it was like, help the youth or something like that. And then in your 60s, like be a grandfather and enjoy your children, right? I just turned 40, and I'll be honest. I think that I've never felt more integrated, and I've never felt better in my life than right now. I really do believe that your 40s is your prime as a man. And I'm sure you probably feel the same, is that, when you're going through it, it can be very confusing, but hindsight is 2020, right? When I look back at all my failures and all my mistakes, all my successes and all my achievements, to me, it's all in equilibrium, and I don't regret anything. I made mistakes. It's very clear. I'm not a perfect person. I've hurt people. I've also helped people. But I think the one saving grace for me is that I know that when I make a mistake or I do something wrong, I do my best to quickly repent and to right that wrong as much as I can, and to do right, and to become better, and to learn from my mistakes and become better. What I can say about Christianity is that, as I said before, I had never believed that church was a building or a program or a super personality. I don't want to get into gossip or what's going on in the public news these days, but there's a lot of high profile pastors that have fallen from grace in this last year of 2020. It's all over TMZ and the news, from the left wing to the right wing to whatever it is. And I don't think that model of church, which is what I call the mega church model, which is, it's the Walmart model, right? We're going to build a stage and build a Coachella production every Sunday. And there's going to be a rock star pastor, and we're going to have a rock star concert, and we're going to build this church to 10, 20, 30, 50,000. And it's just going to be this huge, successful thing, because bigger is better, right? And more is more, right? And what I realize is that it's just a performance trap.
Yeah.
Right. And I fell into that trap. I was that golden boy. I was like that little young Asian Billy Graham preaching to 1,000, 10,000 kids at a time. And I ate it up, and I let kids put me on a pedestal and let people think that I was holier than thou when I wasn't. And I was struggling with sins, and I was struggling with my sexuality. I was struggling with alcohol, struggling with all these different things. And then I finally was like, you know what? I just want to remove this performance. I want to remove the show. I want to strip down, all human ingenuity, because to me, church is wherever 2 or 3 gather in the name of Christ and obedient to his commands. That's church. To me, this is church. Us two right here, talking about Christ, talking about spirituality, talking about our faith, talking about our life, breaking bread, sharing stories. This is church, right? And so to me, church can be in a living room, it could be under a tree, it could be in an office, it could be in outer space, it could be on Zoom. It doesn't matter where it is. It's where we are, right? We are the church. We don't go to church, we are the church. And so for me, I think after 20 years of trying to figure out my Christianity and feeling shame and guilt and for all the mistakes and people I hurt and all of that, like I finally just accepted it, and I don't find a conflict anymore. Right?
Yeah.
Where now I'm just like, you know what? I'm not a pastor anymore. I'm not a missionary. I'm not holier than thou. Yes, I drink. Yes, I date. Yes, I smoke. Yes, I do everything that maybe you do or don't do. It doesn't matter. There's no judgment, right? But I am just who I am, and what you see is what you get. And I don't have to make any apologies, right? You either like me or you don't like me. You can talk shit about me or not talk shit about me. It's okay, right? But I know who I am, and I know Jesus, and I know that Jesus knows who I am, and I know that he loves me the way I am, and he's down with me, and I'm down with him. And so as long as I have that as my center and my core, then everything else I do, right, just becomes a extension of that relationship that I have with God. And so for me, it's just very simple. I just want to love God. I want to love myself. I want to love others. And I want to do it in a way that's, honest, in a way that's true, and in a way that is authentic. I don't want to just help people because I want people to know that I help people. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't want to build a platform so I can somehow be more powerful or influential or more known or more understood, right? I've just realized that, you know, you can never be satisfied with what the world can give you. And that is what I realized. There's a thing in the Bible that says, scripture in the Bible in 1 John, it says, do not love the things of this world, the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. If you love the things of this world, it means the love of the Father is not in you. Okay. And what that means to me is the things of the world, the lust of the eyes is things. Oh, I want a Ferrari. I want a bigger house. I want, you know, a bigger office. I want a bigger this. I want a bigger that. You know, the lust of the flesh is your carnal nature, right? It's sex, it's drugs, it's gluttony, it's, you know, it's shopping, it's whatever. It's all, I need more things. I need more consumption, right? And the pride of life is, I don't need God. The pride of life is, I'm God. I'm human. Look what I've done. Look what I've accomplished. Look what I've built, right? Look at the millions that I've made, right? And to me, humility is just accepting yourself for who you really are and not making any excuses, but taking responsibility for who you honestly are and recognizing that you need help. And I think the first step to sanity is recognizing that you need help. and you need others, whether that's God or your higher power, or whether that's your wife or your friends or your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, your neighbor, you know, your mentors. Like we can't do life alone. We can't. And I think the lie of life is one specific thing: shame. There's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with you, and you're not good enough. Therefore, you need to fix yourself and you need to do something so that other people will like you. Other people will accept you. When you can break free from shame and you don't need the world's approval to be exactly who you are, that's when the miracles and the magic happens. That's when you become you and you become maximal. Right? It's like when Bruce Lee says, you know, the greatest challenge for any human being is to express themselves honestly through their personality, who they are, right? And I think when you see a Kobe, right, and he's gone through the rape accusations and he's failed and, you know, he's gone through the drama with Shaq, but he still comes back, right? And he just owns his sin, he owns his failures, but he keeps moving forward. He keeps improving, and he wins another championship and another championship. And that's why, like, when Kobe died, there was like this crazy connection globally because everyone felt the depth of his sin, but they also felt the depth of his glory, right? Yeah. And that's what made him human, but that's also what made him superhuman, right? Because at the end of the day, Kobe's just being fucking Kobe. Right. And he was just himself. Right. And that's what I think is what's missing in Christianity or religion in general, is that religion says, I need to be this in order to be accepted. Right. And so it's like, I have to behave a certain way, then you'll believe that I'm a good person, and then I'll be accepted. When God or Jesus or God's love, the Father's love, is like, no, you're already accepted. Believe that you're already good, and guess what? You'll automatically behave because you're not trying anymore. You're just being, right? And so to me, one last quote that I'll say is like a friend of mine once told me that, what's the difference between a good ballerina and a great ballerina? He says, Jason, a good ballerina performs the movement, but a great ballerina becomes the movement.
Yeah.
And that to me is like where I feel like I'm at 40. Like, I never saw my life past 40. I always thought I was going to die before I was 40. So I actually don't have a vision for my life at this point. And, you know, I feel great because I just feel free. I feel like I am who I am, take it or leave it. What you see is what you get. But, you know, I just want to do things because I believe in it. I want to do something because I have a passion for it. And I want to do something because I think it's right. And hopefully, you know, it can come from the heart. So that's it, man. That's the quest. Oh, you know what's crazy?
Boom.
My first rap name was J Quest.
J Quest on the Quest.
That's right. J Quest in junior high school. That was my AOL Instant Messenger name. And that was my rap name, J Quest. That's crazy. On the Quest, J Quest. Here we go.
Well, Jason, dude, thank you so much. This was a wild conversation. I can't think of a better place to end it. You know, that journey of self-acceptance and really finding spirituality within, I think is so important. And it's been, you know, one of the things that's changed my life. So thank you. We're going to have a part 2 at some point to cover like everything that you're doing now. But this is amazing. I think people are going to love it. And I really appreciate it.
Thank you for being my Asian brother. Thank you for pioneering for everyone. And I'm so happy that you've also found your spirituality. So now I have a new spiritual friend. So we'll go from there. All right, brother.
Thanks.
Happy holidays. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.